Okay, Christine, thank you so much. We're live now. You can start your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Rigby. I'm the Senior Air Quality Specialist with the Port of Vancouver in Canada, and I'm here to speak with you today about collaborating to reduce air emissions. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start with this slide for a couple of reasons. This is actually a slide showing black carbon emissions from shipping, and I'll touch a little bit later on in the presentation on black carbon. I think it's a very important issue. But the other reason I like to start with it is because it really helps to show the interconnectivity of international shipping. Everywhere on this slide that you see color is shipping activity. And we see color pretty much everywhere in the water sections of the slide. So it's just, I find it very helpful in that regard. Next slide, please. So ports bring together everything. They bring together people, places, and things. They support land and water side decarbonization in that we have to help both with the infrastructure on the land side for things like trucks and trains and ships and cargo handling equipment, as well as to support decarbonization infrastructure for the ships that call our ports. We need to consider when we look to decarbonize in one sector, we need to consider what's happening in other sectors. For example, as we are working with our utility provider to bring in electricity for something like shore power for ships to plug in, we need to keep in mind at the same time what kind of electricity might be needed in those locations in the future for, say, for example, electrified cargo handling equipment. We also work to help facilitate policies and funding to support industry to move forward with decarbonization. Internationally, we also help to work with each other, port to port efforts, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And really, it comes down to the fact that this issue is so much bigger. Decarbonization of ports and international trade is so much bigger than one individual port. None of us can create the needed change on our own, so we really need to work together. Next slide, please.
For the conference.
So the Port of Vancouver is Canada's largest and most diversified port. In 2019, we traded 144 million tons of cargo across 27 different major marine terminals. We also have hundreds of other supporting operations around our port. We border 16 different municipalities and several Coast Salish First Nation as well. And in that year, we had just over 3,100 vessel calls. Next slide, please. In 2016, we came out with a vision to be the world's most sustainable port, and decarbonization, reducing air emissions are an integral part of that. Now, as with many other ports, we operate in and around a dense urban environment, and that brings with it many opportunities as well as challenges. And these also require us to collaborate with the communities around us. Next slide, please. So to provide a little bit of background in terms of air emissions from our port, I've got two graphs here for you from our last emission inventory in 2015. The graph on the left is air quality related emissions, and it shows us what we'd like to see. The black line going upwards is our forecast growth in throughput, and the blue bars are our total emissions going forward in time to 2030. And what we see here is a significant decoupling between that black line, the growth in throughput, and the total air quality related emissions. This decoupling is largely due to regulatory changes, things like the North American Emission Control Area, as well as other cleaner fuel regulations and lower engine emission standards. Our own programs to reduce emissions and voluntary efforts by our customers and by our tenants would complement those reductions. The graph on the right shows a very different story. This is our greenhouse gas emissions. And what you'll see is the blue bars, total greenhouse gas emissions from the port, going up roughly tracking that growth in trade, the black line. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to come back to the topic of black carbon. And so this inventory that we did in 2015 was the first time we had really assessed black carbon to really understand how much additional contribution to climate change the port had from this pollutant. The graph on the left shows the 100-year time frame, which is typically how we look at greenhouse gases, and the graph on the right is the 20-year time frame. And I include that one because black carbon is such a potent short-term climate forcer. What we can see, the black carbon contributions to climate change are the gray, and the greenhouse gas contributions are the blue. That in a 100-year time frame, black carbon adds another roughly 15% more contribution to climate change over and above what we already saw in the previous graph for those greenhouse gases. And in a 20-year time frame, it's more than a third more contribution. So it's a very significant pollutant, and one that we're watching very carefully and working to reduce. Next slide, please. So our approach to reducing air emissions is really flexibility is key. We know from talking to our customers and our tenants that there is no one solution that works best for all stakeholders. Back a long time ago, before the North American Emission Control Area came into effect, we asked stakeholders at that time, are you going with shore power or are you going with cleaner fuels? And what we were told is both, really. Some were going shore power, some were going alternative fuels. So that's really helped to inform our strategies going forward. So we really focus on having results-based strategies. We identify the goal, but we don't identify how we want our customers and our tenants to reach those goals. We also include, as much as we can, long-term goals, so the end goal, as well as shorter-term objectives. And that helps with decision making in terms of when to change out equipment, what to change it out to, and so on. We try to be adaptive, responsive, and collaborative, and I'll highlight that through a number of our international and local efforts in the coming slides. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So the first international effort that I'll highlight here is really one of our more longer running efforts, the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy. So this strategy began in 2007 as a partnership between the ports of Vancouver and the ports of Seattle and Tacoma in the United States. It was also supported and is supported by both Canadian and US regulatory agencies. And it included, in 2007, sector targets for ocean-going vessels, harbor craft, cargo handling equipment, trucks, rail, and port administration. We've been issuing annual progress reports ever since, and the focus was on diesel particulate matter and greenhouse gas reductions, with objectives at that time for 2010 and 2015. In 2013, we updated the strategy and included the Northwest Seaport Alliance, additional support from government agencies in Canada. We added airshed-wide targets for both diesel particulate matter and greenhouse gas emissions, and we took the strategy objectives out to 2020. So this is a really unique effort in that we're in a shared airshed and we're actually competing with each other. We are 4 ports that compete with each other for business. Next slide, please. We have just at the end of 2020 completed a renewal of the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy. And I call this a renewal as opposed to an update because it really is quite a different version of the strategy. We looked at the previous decade of experience and we really tried to learn from that. We tried to learn from the context where we are today, which is quite different from where we were when we started the process in 2007. And we've created in this new version of the strategy an overall vision to provide that long-term goal, indication of where we're trying to go to our customers and our tenants and other stakeholders. So that vision is to phase out emissions from seaport-related activities by 2050, supporting cleaner air for our local communities and fulfilling our shared responsibility to help limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Underneath that vision, there are objectives for each of the port sectors, and those objectives all follow the same 3 themes for phasing out emissions. The first theme is policies to continually improve efficiency and reduce emissions. The second theme is to support infrastructure for zero emission equipment. And lastly is the actual demonstration and adoption of that zero emission equipment. The strategy also identifies key roles and responsibilities, both for port authorities as well as other stakeholders. Because again, this isn't something that any one or even 4 port authorities can do on their own. It highlights the opportunity for collaborative actions and where these make the most sense, as well as providing for the opportunity for each of the ports to have their own specific implementation plans where that makes more sense. We have also joint annual review and reporting, which we'll be continuing as we've done over the last 12 years. Next slide, please. So the benefits of working together on this strategy are really quite many. These are just a few examples. As I mentioned, we're in a shared airshed, so it really would not have made sense for us to just move emissions around. If Vancouver implemented more stringent requirements, for example, for ships calling our port and Seattle didn't, those ships could simply move to Seattle, and it really wouldn't benefit us in terms of air quality or climate change related emissions. So we really worked hard to use the strategy as an opportunity to make sure that environment was not a competitive issue between our 4 ports. Working together on this strategy helps to strengthen the weight of targets as well. There are now 4 ports going out into the world and speaking with customers and tenants and other stakeholders, highlighting the strategy, its targets, and its objectives. We also have the opportunity to pool technical resources. I'm able to pick up the phone at any time and reach out to one of the US ports or one of their regulators and ask questions about a technology, for example, and that's really helpful. So we're able to learn from each other. We've really developed some strong relationships over the last 12 years and really fostered better communication and awareness of how each of our ports operates, what are our challenges and what are our opportunities. Next slide, please. Now, all of that said, there are also many challenges of working together, and it's something that we've been working really hard on over the last 12 years to address these challenges. Fundamentally, there are some really major differences between the 4 ports, particularly between Vancouver and the 3 US ports. How ports in Canada and US operate and are regulated is quite different. For example, in Canada, ports are federally regulated, and in the US, they're more closely tied to either the municipality or the county level, as opposed to federal. The size and the growth rates of our ports is also very different. Vancouver is significantly larger than the 3 US ports that are involved in this strategy, and our growth rate is quite high as well. The diversity in business types and of cargo handled is also quite different. Vancouver is a very diverse port, as I mentioned earlier, with those 27 different major marine terminals and hundreds of other operations. And so that really affects our how we approach a strategy like this and what we can do and in what time frame. And the financial support mechanisms also differ quite a bit between Canada and the US. So we've had to get creative with coming up with solutions for dealing with these challenges so that we can realize all of those benefits of working together that we talked about on the previous slide. We've taken a goal-oriented approach for the strategy. So again, similar to Vancouver's own approach, we identify goals and objectives, but not how to reach those goals and objectives. So that allows each port to use their own tools to reach those targets. We also emphasize progress within each port as opposed to between each port, again, trying to remove that competitive aspect. And we just talk a lot. And that may sound like it's a negative thing, but it's actually a very positive thing. We have regular teleconferences and we meet periodically, and that's really helped to help foster good communication. Next slide, please. The next initiative I'll touch on briefly is the International Collaboration on Ship Emission Reductions Initiative. So we started this in 2018, we did the first phase in 2019, guided by a international project team. And so this really stems from port incentive programs for cleaner vessels. Vancouver's had one, I'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, for a number of years, but there are many other ports that offer incentives to cleaner vessels as well. And what we found was that there was a real opportunity to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of these programs, both for ports offering the incentives as well as for shipping lines trying to access the incentives. At the same time, we heard from our customers that there was a similar opportunity to improve the efficiency and effectiveness for environmental infrastructure, things like shore power availability and alternative fuel bunkering availability. So the concept is not that dissimilar to how we book travel today. So if you're going somewhere in a normal year, you probably don't go on to 10 different hotel websites to compare which hotel you'd like to stay at. You would go onto a single web aggregator website, put in where you'd like to stay and the dates and some other parameters, and it would search those sites and come up with information for you. And this would be, the concept here would be something similar, where instead of individual ships having to go to each individual port's website to figure out how to access these incentives, you could go to one web aggregator site and do that in one place more efficiently. We had excellent feedback through a survey in 2007 where there was a lot, 2019. It was completed by 137 stakeholders of all different kinds from around the world with quite a bit of support. And we're now looking at options for moving into a second implementation phase for this effort as well. Next slide, please. The World Ports Climate Action Program is another effort that was launched in 2018. It's a collaboration of 12 global ports working towards decarbonization, again, of both ports as well as international trade. There are 5 work groups under the action plan, one focused on supply chain efficiency, another on policy, another on power to ship or shore power, sustainable low carbon marine fuels, and then the last group on the decarbonization of cargo handling facilities. Each of these work groups is made up of a number of different ports from that group of 12, with a team lead for each work group. There's an approved action plan with various deliverables over the next number of years for each work group, as well as additional actions that we're working on. So these could range from things like the development of an online literature review tool to help facilitate the reviewing the many different reports that are out there on sustainable low carbon marine fuels, to developing coordinated policies for things like incentives and recognition programs. Next slide, please. In the Port of Vancouver, we are working to be LNG, liquefied natural gas bunkering port, starting in 2022. And this really requires us to work closely with others, both our customers, our tenants, as well as other ports. There are other LNG bunkering ports already out there, and we need to make sure that what we offer will work with the ships that are already accessing this type of a fuel. So there's, again, a lot of dialogue, a lot of communication between ourselves and other stakeholders to bring something like this forward. Next slide, please. We're also involved in the Maritime Hydrogen Safety Joint Development Project. So this is an effort to help to support vessels that are working towards, in this case, hydrogen fuel capability. It's very challenging right now for them to go through an approvals process because there's not a process that's designed for this type of a fuel on a vessel. So this is a multi-stakeholder global group, again, working to help streamline that process so that there's less of a barrier for these types of vessels going forward. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit now about some of our local programs that also rely very heavily on collaboration with our stakeholders. Our Eco Action program has been around since 2007. This is our vessel incentive program. So we offer discounts to vessels that go beyond requirement to reduce their air emissions and their underwater noise, discounts of up to 47% off of their harbor dues. It's been a really successful program, and over the years we've gradually had to make the criteria a little bit more challenging to make sure that we're continuing to offer those incentives to the front runners of the front runners. The Blue Circle Award is the award that we give to the shipping lines that have the greatest participation in this program. And every year as we go through a review of this program, we check in with other ports as well as the different criteria, rating providers for shipping lines, that sort of thing. Again, just working with them to see what we need to do in future years in terms of setting those criteria. Next slide, please. Shore power, we have had at our port since 2009. So shore power is essentially a big plug, as you can see here. So when a vessel comes to the berth, it's able to shut off its auxiliary engines and plug into, in our case, the BC Hydro electricity grid, uh, which is a significant reduction for us of both air quality as well as greenhouse gas related emissions. Um, we need to make sure that those plugs fit the outlets that are on the vessel. We need to make sure that they're positioned on the berth face so that the vessels that will be calling that berth can connect as well. We need to work with the terminal operator to make sure that there are people that can connect the vessels and that they're able to do their work of unloading and loading the vessels around those connection points. So again, another great example of how we work with others and why it's important to work with others. Funding for shore power is another great example of that. It's an extremely expensive way of reducing emissions, a very good way of reducing emissions, but one that requires a number of organizations to work together to cover those costs. Next slide, please. Climate Smart is a program that we've been working on since 2015. We've just finished our 6th year of the program last year. So what we do here is we offer discounts off of a training program for our tenants to help them to measure their greenhouse gas emissions, identify opportunities to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions and get internal support for those reduction efforts, as well as to communicate to their stakeholders. So again, it's an opportunity for us to work with the operators around the port on reducing these emissions. Next slide, please. Our non-road diesel emissions program, we started this one in 2015, and it's a fee and incentive-based program. So we charge our tenants fees per horsepower hour for their use of older, higher emission diesel, non-road diesel equipment. And then when they change out or upgrade those pieces of equipment to lower emission types, they get most of those fees back. We just keep a small administrative fee. So it's really designed to help accelerate that equipment changeover. So when we designed this program and as we go through our current review of the program, we work closely with our tenants to make sure that the requirements that we're putting in are pushing, but not pushing in an unreasonable way. And we also, there's a similar program outside of the port's jurisdiction in the local regional district. And so we also work with them to try and be as consistent as possible between the two programs to make sure that neither of us are creating a competitive advantage or disadvantage on or off port property. Next slide, please. Our Energy Action Initiative, we actually have someone in our department, my colleague Dorota. She is our Industrial Energy Management Specialist, and she's actually an employee of the port, but also of BC Hydro, who is our local utility provider, electricity utility provider. And so what her job is to act as a conduit between the utility provider and our tenants, so that she can help them to access incentives and funding and facilitate studies for them to help them to both improve their energy efficiency as well as move away from things like fossil fuels towards electrification. Next slide, please. And lastly, the Clean Technology Initiative is a new initiative, and it's sort of a bundle package. It's a partnership with the province of British Columbia to facilitate and demonstrate clean technologies. And it really looks at all different sectors from container trucks on the roads to biodiesel and LNG marine fuels, renewable diesel, battery electric, hydrogen. So it's both on and off road. And again, it's an excellent example of how we need to work together, both in terms of funding, but as well as in terms of implementing pilots and broader adoption of these types of technologies. It's not something that a port can do on its own, but it's certainly an opportunity where the port has a role to help bring people together and help facilitate these types of projects. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? Really, our approach is to continually reflect on what we've been doing, what's been working, what hasn't been working, where are there opportunities for us to evolve? And can we explore new programs? We work to constantly improve our existing programs as well as look for opportunities to implement new ones. And really, together over time, we will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Very insightful. We have received a couple of questions from the audience, so I'll read them out for you, and you can answer if that's okay. Sure. So John Key is saying, what has the effect of COVID-19 been on the environment, emissions, and air quality over there? I read that while numbers were up due to reduced cruise ship numbers, for example, how to avoid a reversal in environmental impact post-COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the Metro Vancouver, which is the regional government, has a really extensive air quality monitoring network and have been looking at that. And I think that particularly early on in COVID, that there were some improvements in air quality. I think the port continued to operate quite well in terms of throughput, with the exception of cruise. Obviously, our cruise season did not happen in 2020. But the rest of the activity at the port really didn't slow down overall. We had to keep everything moving still, and we were able to do that successfully. And much of the rest of the region, I think, again, in the very early days, there would have been less people driving their cars and that sort of thing. But I know things have gotten busier. I'm still working in my kitchen, but there are a lot of people that are out and about on the roads now. Other than that, I think, for me personally, in my role at the port, there's less travel. Normally I would be coming to a conference like this, and now I'm able to present in this way, which helps to reduce emissions, and shows that we really can do these things. Face-to-face interactions are really important as well, but there are a number of things that I've been able to move forward with others around the world virtually, very well, and so it's been a great learning opportunity in that regard.
Thank you, Christine. Working from the kitchen or from home sounds very, very familiar here. We have some more questions. In regards to reducing air emissions, most would think this process would involve alternative fuels, technology, etc. What about human factor influence, especially when it comes to maneuvering time? Do the training and qualifications needs to be more considered?
Yeah, certainly operational efficiency is a huge component of reducing emissions. And efficiency is something that's important, not just while we're operating on fossil fuels. It's important regardless of the fuel type, because there are environmental and other impacts from any fuel or technology type. Batteries, hydrogen, everything has impacts. And so wherever we can improve efficiency to reduce that fuel, I think is important going forward. And so we have an entire other section of the port that deals with operational and supply chain efficiencies. So when I present something like the Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy, we do acknowledge in the strategy the importance of that type of efficiency, but it's not the focus of that strategy, because we have those other business units that are already really quite well managing those issues.
Thank you, Christine. And then you talked about how the high growth rate in Vancouver, and whether this does increase the emissions. And do you have a different approach compared to the US, for example, when it comes to the strategy?
We do not necessarily because of our high growth rate. I mean, we have the same that same vision of phasing out emissions, and we have the same shorter term objectives. Just an example of one of the objectives is that by 2030, all major container and cruise berths would have shore power. So that's at all 4 ports. For us, it means more berths would need to have shore power because we're a larger port. But what the different approaches, I would say, are more dictated by the difference in governance of our ports. So for example, we have our Eco Action Incentive Program. We charge harbor dues and we're able to provide discounts on those harbor dues to shipping lines. The other 3 ports don't charge harbor dues and they don't have an incentive program. So they are working on other ways to encourage those shipping lines to reduce their emissions. For our container trucks, we have a licensing system. So in order for a container truck to access our port, they have to get an approved license from us. And since 2008, we've had increasingly stringent environmental requirements in order for them to get a license. So that's how we've approached improving things in our container trucking sector. The US ports don't have a container licensing system, but they do have access to funding that's allowed them to do a truck scrappage program. So again, we're working towards those common goals, but we're doing it with the tools that we have available to us.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine. That was all the questions I had for you. Thank you. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for joining us. And I know that it's terrible timing for you at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I appreciate your effort for being here and sharing some of your knowledge and expertise and some of very, very interesting information from Vancouver Port. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, and you too.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Christine. So as we finish this presentation, I'd like to introduce the next speaker of the day, who will be talking about Environmental Port Index, improving port operations via documenting emissions. The speaker is Evan Husby, Head of Environment, Port of Bergen. So we're going back to Europe.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to be invited to these presentations. I thought, well, first of all, I'm head of environment at Port of Bergen, and I'm also in charge of a joint project among Norwegian cruise ports, which is called Environmental Port Index. And maybe a small introduction to this project could be given if you present the video, Samantha.
Just a moment.
Now is the time to secure a better future for our industry, communities, and planet with the Environmental Port Index. Despite being the world's most efficient form of transport, there is still huge potential for shipping to reduce its carbon footprint. The Environmental Port Index, or EPI, is a unique reporting tool designed to help ship owners and port operators to chart a course for positive change. Upon departure from each port, the EPI system awards ships with a score between 0 and 100 for their efficiency while at quay. This makes it easy for port operators to see which ships are committed to acting sustainably while visiting their ports. Ports can then choose to incentivize sustainable actions by rewarding greener ships and penalizing persistent polluters. Encouraging ships to use cleaner fuels, onshore power, and fewer natural resources not only fights the climate crisis around the world, it reduces local air and water pollution, improving the quality of life right here at home for our communities on land and in the water too. With the benefit of insightful EPI reports, both ship owners and port operators are empowered to increase their efficiency in key areas whilst lowering operational costs. By establishing the EPI at every port, we can make it easier than ever for ships to operate efficiently and responsibly with straightforward, standardized reporting wherever they call. The Environmental Port Index, greener ports for a cleaner world. Visit epiport.org to find out more.
Yeah. I'm on again.
Yes, you're back on.
Okay, thanks. Let me share this screen with you. Yeah. So basically, starting point for this effort was the needs of the port in Bergen to, what should I say, improve on the environmental impact from the cruise ships. And we realized that it's difficult to utilize the actual emissions because ships differs in size. You know, they are small, big, old, new, and all that sort of things. But one thing is in sort of joint opportunity, and that is to actually improve on the operational side of things. The ship can achieve a lot, have we realized, through operational measures, and that's actually the main focus of the EPI project. Let's see if I can move on here. Not again. That was not intentional, sorry. It's here we go. Okay. Basically, what we've done among us in this project is that we have developed a digital solution where ships are reporting their environmental performance at the port. So as you see, there is a portal solution available. Ships may enter this one, add their information, and the ports may enter this one as well and retrieve information about how the performance has been done. So it's a relatively simple type of approach, but it works very well. We both have emission data for the ships, and we also have what we have called the EPI score, which is a composite score integrating information about SOx, NOx, particles, and then energy consumption into an expression of operational performance. The score is say something about how much has the ship improved while at quay. Let me see. Yeah. Basically, the way it works is that if there is a new ship reported to approach the port or in port, then we would add a description of the ship into our database system. This is guided by professionals. We have an arrangement or an agreement with the DNV regarding doing this then. And when the ship is leaving the port, it issue a report through a web-based interface. This could also be automatic if that was an opportunity. And then after the report is conducted, we have a quality control. We are currently working on the audit sort of procedures concerning this as well then. But we should ensure that there is quality in the system. And then the data will be calculated and published and made available through standard interfaces then. And that means that the port can either approach the portal system, or the port can also interface digitally, linking the information to their own systems then. And that is typically what we do in a Norwegian context. So when the port receives the data in the Norwegian port, the administrative system of the ports brings the information about the EPI score into economical calculation, adding incentives, that sort of things. So this is a project which actually has evolved since 2017. We had a really good testing period, collaborating with MSC Cruises, among others, and I verified that things worked smoothly. And then we were operational in 2019 with 4 ports. We were documenting 567 cruise calls and 111 ships, which is really good in a cruise context. Then there's a limited set of ships out there actually. Yeah, so for 2020, 16 ports were actually ready or are on board to start their reporting. And we also developed this as a company with the ports as shareholders then. So then the ambition forwards is to have more ports on board. This is an international solution, it's open for everybody. And the other ambitions they are to improve the methodology. We would like to include more environmental aspects, not just air emission and energy, but also noise and effluence to sea, that sort of thing. And we are also looking into adding more ships of types of ships. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening concerning this stuff. Yeah, so what did we achieve in 2019? It's difficult to talk about what we achieved in 2020. It's been a relatively quiet year for most of us. But in 2019, we got some interesting results actually. If you look at this graph, you see that the blue bars indicate the minimum score for a ship, individual ship, and the green is the sort of best score this ship achieved. And what's interesting here is that there is a big potential for improvement. You know, when a ship has like a variation in 30 in score, it means that they can do things while at quay. They can implement measures which benefit the port and the local community. And this sort of variation can be attributed to choice of fuel quality, energy reduction in different ways, how you run your cleaning systems, etc. So it's a comprehensive assessment which is made, and this picture is in a way a very good illustration of our main point, that operational improvements can contribute a lot to the environmental impact. If you look at how the average score changed throughout the season, we see it actually that from the 1st to the 15th call for the average ship, we got an improvement. And we think this can be attributed to either, what should I say, their ambitions about being greener, more sustainable, and that they see how this system works as a way of approaching these things. But it's also probably, and most likely, linked to the fact that we have been backing this with really good incentive systems. So, like the incentive systems we are running in at the Port of Bergen, we actually say that if you have a 30 in EPI score, which is quite average, we don't change our fees. But if you have 0 in score, 0 in score means that the ship is on the requirement from authorities, from law, but they have not done any improvement. Then you get an increase in 150%. Likewise, if you have a high score, like you are on shore power or a zero emission ship, you will be 100 DPI, which is then a small reduction on the port fees. The point here is that this is a bonus malus system. It's we've implemented in Bergen a stretch from 150 minus to 17.5 plus is a big stretch then. The other ports, there are 13 ports among those listed here which implement similar measures. The other ports, they are approaching what we are doing in Bergen. And here you see the calculation. If typical cost for a call is $10,000, zero API means $25,000, and economy matters. And the economy is actually driving this. And we've seen some indication that ship owners make deliberate choices. I can't confirm this, but there's an indication that they've been visiting some ports at some point, and then they had a really low score because the economical outcome was not so very good. While they went to Bergen, and the situation was the opposite, and then they choose cleaner fuels and other solutions. Then, so we think economy matters in this context, and so this is important. I think we have sort of a general recommendation from what we have achieved in our project, and that is that all ports should establish strong incentive schemes. And there is a point that all ports should do it, because if all do it, we think the ship owners will follow suit, because they see this is not just a few ports or one port, but it's sort of what's expected to be compliant with or to adjust to them. We also think that polluter pays principle is important, that we have a bonus-malus system. It's not just a bonus, you know. You need to sort of feel the pressure as well. That's at least our perspective. And we also think that based on what I have been saying, that the incentive schemes needs to be developed, focusing on the operational improvement. This is the sort of area where we can achieve a lot. So that was actually what I wanted to say. I don't know if there are any questions related to this.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for being here with us today and explaining us a little bit more about this. The question I received from the audience, if you don't mind answering that, is that commenting on your bonus-malus system that you mentioned, polluter pays principle. Could you please comment how does that work in practice?
Well, how it works in practice is actually fairly easy to. You see the equation here, and the point is that if the ship departs from the port, and they get a score of 30. 30 is an estimate we've done, or a calculation we've done regarding what is the average score a ship achieves. We say we don't change the cost of your stay, so it will be on an average ship around $10,000 then. But if they're not doing anything, you know, if they are just doing what the authorities say is the basic level, it's 0.1 sulfur fuel, sort of other measures like they are following the NOx requirements, etc. Then this is not good enough, is our opinion. So then we are increasing the incentives. Sorry, we are increasing the cost of the port stay with 150%. So it feels a bit dramatic, but based on the sounds a bit dramatic, but based on the experience, it works very well. Actually, we have seen that some of the old ships have disappeared. This is not just because of what we're doing here. It's also, of course, a part of this transformation taking place in the business as a whole. But we've seen that some of the old ships, some of the more polluting ones, have chosen other destinations. So I think we are on the right track then. While most of the newer ships, they are able to adapt to this scheme, and then we are achieving good results with them.
Ivan, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for answering the question. And it's really good to have you here today and have a little bit of perspective from Norwegian seaports. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do you have any final remarks, any closing comments?
No, I don't have any final remarks, but please take a look at this website, and if you're interested, just contact me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to the next speaker and a case study, the strategic role of ports in development of clean fuels for shipping, green maritime methanol and hydrogen as a shipping fuel. So we are welcoming on the stage Jan Egbersten, Innovation Manager, Port of Amsterdam. Jan, whenever you are ready, the stage is yours. I see that Jan is not yet connected. He is trying to connect, but our next speaker probably is available. Ashley Woods. Ashley, let us know if you are able to join us live.
Hi, Samantha, can you hear me?
Yes, Ashley, hello. I can hear you and I can see you. So Ashley Woods, Global Head of Environmental Improvement and HSSE Performance Insights APM Terminals. So Ashley, if you are ready to present, you can go ahead.
Sure, and just to check, do you want me to do it live here or do you want to use the recording?
You can do live here, I think, yeah, if that's okay with you.
Yep, sure. Just give me a second while my screen shares.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just having a slight technical issue sharing my screen. Bear with me.
No worries, take your time. Otherwise, we can play the recording because I know you pre-recorded the presentation, so if that's easier, we can do that straight away.
Good afternoon. I'm Ashley Woods. I'm the Global Head of Environmental Improvement for APM Terminals. And today, for the session, I'm going to take you through a presentation looking at the role of the terminal operator in decarbonising container logistics and some other areas of environmental management. The reason that that's kind of small is because I think we just need to be mindful and continue to focus on some of those other areas as well. It's kind of the challenge of our time is climate change, along with other things as well. And what's important is we don't lose focus on other aspects of environmental impacts that we can have and how we can manage them. And there's a good reason for that as well, because actually the interlinking of many of these management areas means that benefits in one area can also have a benefit in another area. And I'll come on to what I mean by that shortly. So for the presentation today, I'm going to kind of tell you a bit about APM Terminals if you don't know who we are, and then go through looking at environmental impacts of container terminal operations. What does that look like inside the fence and what we can do about it, particularly focused on decarbonisation. And then we're going to kind of step out a bit and think about, the state of the global economy and thinking about the year we've had in 2020, and then come back in to think about container terminal logistics, but looking outside the fence as well. And then finally, a little bit of a thought around the pace of change and what you guys think about that. So as APM Terminals, we are part of the Maersk Group. We operate 75 container terminals around the world. 50% of those roughly are actually non-operated joint ventures. We operate about 40 ourselves, and we move 12 million moves per year, 34,000 vessel calls, or a bit over, more than 20,000 employees. And we're spread geographically across much of the world. We also emit 500,000 tons of CO2 per year, roughly. We consume just under 1 million cubic meters of water per year. We emit around 13 tons of refrigerant gases as part of our operations as well. So that's kind of us in brief. Now moving on to kind of environmental impacts of our operations. Obviously, as I say, climate change has been a big focus, but there are many other areas. And the reason it's important to focus on that is because in themselves, they are issues that need our attention and we need to be mindful of. But also the interlinking of all of this means that, activities to combat climate change can also have a positive impact on air emissions, or habitat loss to do with expansion activities can have a negative impact on climate change and the ability to sequester carbon. Could also be that, waste generation practices at our site can result in contaminated off-site if we don't have good waste management processes. So because of that interconnectivity, actually many solutions will be found through through some of those other aspects as well, not focusing directly on climate change, but through some of those other areas we can actually positively impact and reduce our carbon emissions. The other thing that's important is to keep things in context. We talk a lot in numbers. I gave you that introduction to the company. It doesn't really tell you a lot that we have 40 terminals and we emit 500,000 tons of CO2 per year and that we use 1 million litres of water. But we need a bit of context to then see how actually well are we doing and where are our impacts. And I use this example a lot in training. So we have 2 terminals. They're exactly the same in terms of operations, except one uses 250,000 litres of water per year and one uses over 500,000 litres of water per year. And the question I always ask is, who's got the biggest environmental impact? And logically, you might say terminal depot B because it's using more. And that's kind of a very kind of number-driven kind of financial look at it, which is what we kind of do sometimes with environmental performance. We give it numbers, but also it needs the context. So in this particular example, actually depot A might have the biggest environmental impact because it's in a water-stressed area. Depot B is not. Now, I'm not saying that we should always be focusing on limiting our resource use. We shouldn't just waste a resource just because it's there. But equally, when we're focusing on why do we want to use new technologies and new processes to improve our consumption performance, then we should be focusing on the areas where it has the biggest impact. And it could be terminal A. Then when you come up at the portfolio level, so this is kind of then we use that methodology for the inside the fence view, we can see what does which areas do we need to focus and where. And so, for instance, here, again, focusing on water just for a minute, we see that 50% of our water consumption currently occurs in medium or highly water-stressed areas. So there's still quite a lot we need to focus on, and we can target then our activities. But what we also see is that if we look out to 2030, and here we're using water-stress data from the World Resources Institute, we see that actually the majority of our water consumption is going to occur in very high-risk areas. So that has an impact. That means that our impact is going to be greater in those areas, proportionally speaking, but also it means that the resilience of operations might be under threat as well. Take the drought that we had in South Africa, in Cape Town a couple of years ago. That had an impact on our operations and also on the wider community. And then we found ourselves in the situation where we're a big water consumer in one of those locations, and we're doing all we can to reduce our consumption. And yet next door we have informal settlements and townships where people are having to kind of queue to access water. So it's just not right to be in that situation. So other ways that we can, further reduce our consumption or maybe optimize our portfolio so that we avoid that and mitigate that risk. And again, it's from a resilience side, from a physically, how we operate, but also you might think about the societal responses to things like that also could impact our operations. And we're seeing that already even in Europe with where protests and even kind of rioting because of access to water issues during droughts. In this case, it's in Bulgaria. So keep that in mind. We're going to jump back now into carbon. And that view from inside the fence means that we've worked a lot on the steps that we can take to reduce our emissions. So kind of splitting between demand and supply, we've done a lot on the demand side, and there's actually many easy solutions out there for us. So we can improve our processes, make them more efficient. So reduce the circuit time of thermal tractors by having optimized routings, deploying the right number of equipment, keeping them maintained so that they're more efficient, but then also kind of maybe doing some technology switches. So direct drive diesel to diesel electric systems, LED lighting and smart lighting. So we start combining all these things and we gradually reduce our consumption of energy and then our associated emissions. You see that in the charts on the right-hand side. So gradual improvements over time in terms of total emissions on the bottom and emission intensity per TEU on the top. And then we can do some big things as well, which are relatively easy to do. So we can switch all our electricity supplies to renewables. In many places we can do that. We can also purchase gas coming from waste products like biogas from landfill, or we can switch to waste oils that have been created into diesel, the kind of used cooking oil methylated esters and things. And we've done that. So the example on the bottom is from Gothenburg Terminal. We spent 8 years kind of doing those changes, optimizing a few technology deployments, etc. And then in 2019, we switched all our energy across renewable supply. We switched over to a recycled cooking oil diesel, and we've taken our emissions right down. So although we're looking at, testing an automated straddle carrier there, Night Rider project, but actually we've done a lot of stuff and we've achieved 90% reduction in emissions through our existing operations. And that's the thing we need to think about. Inside the fence, we can do loads right now. We can also then start looking at these sort of emerging and newer technologies and how do they play into this. And again, that can be from, say, electrified equipment or hybrid equipment, but also kind of automation, machine learning, and applications of artificial intelligence as well. And we've seen some really quite interesting things from that. The two examples here, one is truck alignment systems and one is reefer control systems. So those two kind of automation methods mean that you optimize where the truck is for the placing of the container or the lifting of the container, or you optimize the system on the reefer so that it kind of maintains the set point in a smarter way for whatever the internal cargo temperature needs to be. And in both those, you can see very small reductions. Every container. For the crane, it's 0.5 kilowatt per move, and for the reefer, it's 30% per TEU day. Now, then you multiply that up across a single container terminal, and that's 65 metric tons of CO2 saved in the case of the crane truck alignment, and then for reefer management, for a kind of 20,000 TEU day reefer container terminal, then you've got 90 metric ton reduction in CO2. That's obviously assuming that you're buying grid electricity, in this case using Spanish emission factors. But you multiply that up across a terminal and then across a portfolio, and you then integrate that with those other savings we talked about on the first page, and you can achieve some really startling reductions in energy consumption and then associated emissions. Now, then taking that and building it up, what does a pathway to decarbonisation look like? Again, just focusing on the container terminal. We can do that here for looking at major types of container handling equipment. We take a base case year, and then we look at what happens if we switch to renewable energy everywhere where we can do it. We have a combination of electric and hybrid RTG operations. We're smart about what we do. We can achieve almost 50% reduction. The smart's important because there's no silver bullet. Electrified RTGs are more emitting if we're buying grid electricity in locations where the grid emission factor is around 600 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour or more. So in those locations, you want to go for a hybrid solution, most likely. So by being smart and looking at it, that's what we can achieve. And then thinking about the on knock-on benefits, nitrogen oxide emissions, sulfur oxide emissions, and particulate matter emissions reductions. So that kind of focus on climate change delivers all these benefits as well in the port area. And our ports tend to be in urban areas or near close to urban areas. So it's a win-win. But we can't just look at our terminal on its own. And the World Economic Forum has come up this year and launched the Great Reset. So the Great Reset is about building more equal, inclusive, sustainable economies and societies that are more resilient in the face of pandemics, climate change, and the other changes that we face. And 2020 and the kind of global response to try and reduce and limit the spread of the COVID-19 flu disease has been a real example about working together across different countries and across different industries. We also see that in the development of the vaccine, that kind of global cooperation, and hopefully we'll see that in the deployment, because that's where we're starting to see that maybe that cooperation is failing, and that could mean that we end up with some countries having lots of vaccinated people and other countries not, and that's going to have an impact then on our ability to kind of work together because of the disease transmission risk in this case. So with that in mind, we also need to think about what's the role of the container terminal in that and with our kind of wider industry and wider society. And if you take that kind of approach and thinking about the Great Reset and what the World Economic Forum is talking about, then if we look outside the fence, there are many areas that we can also improve our carbon performance and other environmental performance. So the top line there kind of shows you what you can achieve through electrification, through supporting power to shore for ships, through supporting electrification in inland barging, and many other things, the expansion of rail networks. And then the bottom is kind of, well, if we don't do that, or if we don't do it equally across the whole world, but we prioritize in areas, then we can have places left behind where they don't have that. They have all those emissions coming from the terminal. The vessels are still burning their fuel oil in port, and we have congestion issues and lots of trucks on the road when there are other opportunities. So actually, that collaboration and cooperation is the only way that we can really achieve all of the improvements that we need to combat an issue like climate change. There's a couple of examples of where we're starting to work with that in APM Terminal. So one is with AutoGates. We've installed these for a number of reasons, including kind of safety in a way, in a big way, because we had many incidents of injuries in our manual gate operations. And what we found is that AutoGate has been able to reduce turnaround times of trucks by 11 minutes per truck. So that's from gate in to gate out. Now that means if you start adding that up, it's 250 metric tons of CO2 saved from those trucks having to idle for those 11 minutes or be driving around looking for their container. Now that's not a benefit for us necessarily for our own operations, but it benefits locally because that's less nitrogen and sulfur emissions in particulars. It's also benefiting the trucking company and also from a CO2 perspective. So that's where we kind of have an opportunity to support decarbonisation and other environmental improvements in wider parts of the logistics chain. And then again, we've looked at that and kind of developed the Green Gothenburg Gateway concept on that. We have looked at optimizing the rail network into Gothenburg with the mainliners that service Gothenburg to get products out to global market or to get them into Sweden. And actually, you can see there that, you know, not only is the terminal significantly reduced its emissions from, say around 20 or 16 kilograms of CO2 per TEU down to less than 1, but actually we can take another 400 kilograms of CO2 per TEU away by having that smart connection of rail networks through the port into mainliners and then off around the world. And then if we can partner with, say, you know, looking at MSC and the carbon neutral program they have on Maersk Eco Delivery, then actually the ships that are leaving Gothenburg, which is now the main component of those emissions, can also be zero emission. So you can container move from one part of the world to the other with essentially no or very low carbon emissions. So that's where kind of that collaboration is so important, that we're kind of working together and optimize. And to further that, we just work through a process to safely enable LNG and LPG bunkering at the quay. So when we have those future fuel vessels arriving, we can facilitate that port stay so that those bunkering operators come alongside and work safely and make sure those vessels get back out again. And that's the same as some of the other presenters you'll see here talking about, like the role of the port in, renewable energy being used to generate hydrogen and methanol fuels, etc. So then when we kind of add that all up, we can conceptually look at our operations and we can see actually that connection landside and seaside looks a bit like this. I'm not going to kind of go into the numbers there, you can have a look afterwards, but there can be significant reductions, benefits to the local community, for the customer moving the product, for the logistics suppliers within the chain and ourselves. But it's not just about kind of carbon as well, but we also have the societal benefits. And I just go and have a look at some of the work that's been done to look at the benefits of the Moín terminal in Costa Rica, which we operate. So generating 150,000 jobs locally. We have implemented conservation programs for red list endangered turtles. The environment, and we're doing all that with no CO2 emissions. We have really managed our impacts on the wider environment through the construction and continue to do that through operation and innovation. And that's the way that we can go. So we've worked with the local community to deliver this. It's not just been looking at what we can do ourselves. Now, I'm going to finish then with a kind of pace of change. We can see on the left there, it's been 25 years since the IMO recognized climate change as an issue, and we've got now to 2018 and a commitment around 50% reduction by 2050, which will not meet our Paris objectives. If we look at the right-hand side, that's currently where we are. Stretch target of 1.5 degrees of warming. We have to hit 2, and currently we are kind of at 2.6 with our pledges and 2.9 with our current policies. So the pace of change is too slow. And also, we can't rely on regulation to get us there. So that's where the kind of partnerships, again, it's going to be really important to drive this. Collaboration and innovation. DHL working with Jaguar Land Rover. DHL provide low carbon logistics services, and they also, the Land Rover, and then they also benefit from the electric vehicle technology that Land Rover Jaguar are developing to use in their fleet of vehicles. We also see that Walmart, for instance, with Project Gigaton, have set up a power purchase agreement for their small suppliers that would not be able to access such a mechanism to decarbonize their operations. So bringing them all together to provide them with a platform where they can support Walmart's objective of taking away 1 gigaton of emissions from its supply chain. And if we don't do it that way, it will come through disruption, as we've seen with the likes of electric cars from Tesla and also with Amazon in the kind of logistics. So it will come in one way or another. Potentially with collaboration and innovation, we can have a better handle on those wider kind of interactions and maybe have a more holistic view on it. But equally through disruption, that can also happen, and it will happen. So we need to do it through either way. Because collaboration would be the preference, but we're going to utilize disruption, and that will be a big important component of it. And I guess thinking about the longevity of our own companies, we really need to be aware of disruption, and it's coming, and we need to be on the forefront of this then to make sure that we can still be relevant and still be ahead of this decarbonisation journey. And that's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ashley. We got you live now back on, right? So I received a couple of questions during your presentation, which was very, very, very insightful, very good. Thank you so much. So the question goes, the problem is that right now the availability of green hydrogen, is the production the main restriction? Ashley, can you hear us? I cannot hear you. Ashley, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you. I can't hear anything.
Can you hear me? I wasn't sure if that question was for me or not. Sorry.
Yes, it was. It was. So it's the question goes. The problem right now with the green hydrogen is the availability. So the question is if the production is the main restriction.
Yeah. Let me log out and log back in.
Okay, no worries. Try that.
I'm back now if you can hear me. I had some connection issues.
No worries, Ashley. It happens. So we've been there for a while now. So we've seen all sorts of technical problems. Anyways, thank you so much for your presentation.
I heard the green hydrogen question. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's probably better one for Jan to answer. But yeah, certainly I think that there's need to collaborate to really to grow that if it's going to be a future fuel with imports. But yeah, I think Jan's probably a better person to answer that question.
Okay. All right. So that was all the questions that I have received for now. Hold on. I have another question, but I'm not sure if it's something that you would be comfortable commenting. So can you elaborate on how digitalization impacts emission reductions?
Yes, I think quite simply by understanding your operations and how it's performing, then you can identify those opportunities to improve. So, for instance, like these reefer monitoring systems we've looked at, the fact that we kind of can monitor every minute the energy consumption of the reefer systems, we're able to identify actually they're pulling more power than they need to maintain the set point. But you need a very, very good data set to do that. Same with the digitization, we're kind of creating digital twins of our terminal. So we can see where vehicles are, how they're being deployed, and how efficient is the deployment. Do we have vehicles that are idling for long times? So that wealth of information is really important as long as you can analyze it. So there's probably limitations out there, and particularly for us at the moment in understanding how can we actually really process data at a speed where we can make decisions from it. And that's where the machine learning AI comes in. It's a very good question. I think everyone's kind of grappling with it at the moment because we are very data rich and a bit kind of analysis slow, I would say, at the moment.
Thank you, Ashley. I think yes, a lot of speakers spoke, especially today on this day. You know, the general topics were a little bit more on the technical side, a little bit more on the digital technology side. You know, but it's really interesting for us as well to see how the environment, environmental aspects can be maintained via this digital technology. So thank you for that. Do you have any closing comments or any final remarks?
No, I think just two things. Don't forget about the other aspects of environmental management. Carbon is really important, but it's not the only one. And I think we really have to explore the collaboration side. This problem's too big for any one company to solve. There are many solutions. They all provide marginal benefits, so we really need to work together on it. And I think that's the only way that we're really going to win this. If it's a fight that needs to be won, then I think that's the only way we can do it. So more opportunities to connect and explore solutions.
Okay, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, allow me to reintroduce Jan Egbersten, Innovation Manager, Port of Amsterdam. I believe Jan is just trying to connect now to the stage.
So, hello? Can you hear me now?
Jan, welcome. Thank you so much. I can hear you and I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, just one question. How do I share my presentation, by the way?
At the bottom, you have 4 icons.
Yes.
The third one is the monitor that's crossed over. If you click there and then application window, we should see your presentation.
And then on
The second tab, application window.
yes. And then
I can see it's coming. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Enjoy. The stage is yours.
Okay, I hope everything goes well. I only can see my own screen, so if you've got any questions, I will hear of them later on. My name is Jan Egberts and I work for Port of Amsterdam as Manager Innovation. One of the things we're working on is the building of a hydrogen hub in the Port of Amsterdam, Hydrogen Valley, it's sometimes called. And that's quite a challenge, because if you would only look at shipping, the demand of the shipping for hydrogen, you don't have enough scalability. Actually, what you're looking for as a port region is to have a combination of the production in your own region, perhaps on the longer term, the import of hydrogen into the ports. You're looking for storage facilities, you're looking for the transport of the hydrogen, that can be by truck, by train, by ship, but also by pipeline, which you're working on. And you're looking at the same time on the development of the demand side of hydrogen in the region. So that's for shipping, for instance, for barge and sea shipping as a bunkering fuel, for trucks and cars, public transport. But we expect that the hydrogen will also be used in the industry as heating fuel instead of natural gas, and for the chemical industry, and to produce synthetic fuels. To present a relative complicated picture, this is what a hydrogen port could look like. This is the Outlook 2020-2050 with a lot of projects. The projects partly consist of the production of hydrogen. We're working on 2 major electrolyzers together with local industry, one at the Tata Steel Mill Company, 100 megawatts, and one at the nowadays Vattenfall terminal electricity company. We're trying to connect the Amsterdam region together with Groningen and Rotterdam in a kind of national backbone for the transport of hydrogen. And we're trying to connect the 2 parts of the port itself, so develop a regional hydrogen pipeline system, even possibility to connect it to Schiphol Airport for the use of hydrogen in airport solutions. At this moment, what's going on is that the first hydrogen pump stations, or fueling stations for cars and trucks, have just been opened or are going to be opened in this half year. We're working on a few projects on hydrogen as a shipping fuel, which I will show a little bit later on, but we're also working on alternative synthetic fuels that could use hydrogen as a building block. The national backbone for the hydrogen infrastructure, there's actually a project that's being formed by Gas Union. It's a Dutch independent net operator, and the idea is to use existing natural gas pipelines, one of the 3 which is connecting the major parts of the Netherlands, and use one of these pipelines for the production, for the transport of hydrogen between the major places where hydrogen will be produced, green hydrogen I'm talking about in the future, but also where the demand will be. This hydrogen backbone can also be connected for internationally, for instance, to the Ruhr area. Next step is, how do you connect this hydrogen national backbone to a regional grid? That's roughly about 17 kilometers of distance between A and B, which you see here on the picture. On both locations there will be demand for hydrogen, but there will also be production sites for hydrogen. In the harbor itself, what you see over here are a few local companies who are willing to use hydrogen either as a fuel instead of natural gas, or they're going to use the hydrogen as a building block to produce, for instance, synthetic kerosene or synthetic methanol. And to develop these kind of things, it's quite complicated because you have to look at the connecting of supply and demand. You also have to look at the technical aspects. What are the dimensions of the pipelines? What interfaces do you use for the pipeline to the users? What pressures are you going to use for the pipeline itself and for the users of the hydrogen? There are regulatory and legal aspects like your environmental permits. National legislation for hydrogen infrastructure is still under development in the Netherlands, but I guess that goes for most of Europe. And spatial planning, large parts of the Troussé is not in the port areas, but is in other cities. So you cross a lot of different cities with your regional, but also your national backbone pipeline for hydrogen. And of course, the most important question is the financial and the business model. It's not only about the capex, the investment cost, but also about the opex, the cost of the transportation and the production of the hydrogen. We have to build a business model and an organization model to cope with these kind of challenges, and also looking for grants and subsidies, for instance, on the national and the EU level. Get to the next stage. If you got the hydrogen, how could you use this hydrogen as a strategic mode for alternative fuels in seaports? Also here, you got the price compared to fossil fuels, which is quite a challenge. It's the sales price, which is still too high if you compare it to marine diesel. So you're looking to grants. Also the possibilities of CO2 pricing for inland shipping might be one of the reasons why there will be a quicker change from traditional maritime fuels to more greener fuels. You also got the technical feasibilities in the region, the engine, the ship design, but also the storage of the fuel and the bunkering of the fuel in the port areas. Regulations are quite important. It's about the classification of the ship. If you want to build a barge or sea ship using alternative fuels like hydrogen or synthetic methanol, you need to go to a whole new process of the classification of the ship. It's also about the classification of the bunker fuels and the environmental regulations concerning bunker operations in the port areas. And then, of course, you've got the chicken or the egg discussion. It's about the availability. Is there enough production on site? Is there enough supply in the supply chain? But also, is there enough demand to make the first steps into the using of synthetic fuels or hydrogen as a fuel? As Port of Amsterdam, I would like to show you two projects which we are partner in. One of them is the project H2Ships. It's an Interreg Northwest Europe project. The main objectives of this project are as follows. It's an international consortium with Belgium, France, Germany, UK, and the Netherlands partners. It focuses on the long-term strategy, all kinds of regulatory barriers. How could you solve them? It's focusing on the supply chain of the bunkering, and there are 3 individual pilots on the development of ships sailing on hydrogen. One of the pilots is the pilot we are doing. We're developing a port representation vessel, the Havenbeheer it's called, with hydrogen as fuel. Actually, we're using sodium borehydride, which is a solid form of a hydrogen carrier instead of hydrogen in a gasified form. This pilot includes the development of the supply chain, the bunkering, and the classification of the ship and other regulatory challenges. Originally, we were planning the sailing to start end 2021, but because of all kinds of Corona discussions and some technical aspects, we expect that the ship will be sailing in 2022. Reasons for that are that it's quite challenging if you build a new ship which is using a new type of hydrogen, a new type of fuel. It needs to be classified. So together with Lloyd's Register, we did a hazard study parallel to the design of the ship, just to make sure where are challenges if you use different types or new type of fuel instead of the normal marine diesel fuels for which most ships are classified. Main challenge if you use hydrogen is how will it be stored and what type of hydrogen are you going to use. You can use compressed gas, which means that you would need at least 7 times as much fuel storage compared to maritime diesel. You could use cold or cryocompressed cold or liquids hydrogen, which is quite challenging. minus 250 degrees Celsius, it's quite challenging to use a thing like that on board of a ship. But you could also use material-based hydrogen carriers, like a sodium borehydride I told you about, but also liquid organic carriers or absorbents, which are lesser, at a higher energy density compared to compressed hydrogen as a gas. In our case, we decided to test sodium borehydride. If you've got sodium borehydride, you add water to it, you get sodium boroxide, 4 molecules of hydrogen and heat. The hydrogen goes into a fuel cell, which is used in the electrical engine for electricity. We're also working together with the universities of Delft. H2 Fuels is the company who owns these patents, and the University of Amsterdam for the regeneration of the spent fuel. So on board goes a slurry with natrium hydroxide. If you use the hydrogen, you are left on board with a sodium boroxide. We take it back and we regenerate it so that you have a fully circular kind of fuel. This is this is how the ship is going to look. It's a relatively small ship. It's 20 meters long and 4 or 5 meters wide. We use it in the port area for guests to visit the port, but also the canals in Amsterdam. That's the reason why it's relatively low, because it has to cross under the bridges. In the back of the boat, of course, you've got the electrical engine. The sodium borehydride system is in the front part of the ship. It was quite a challenge because, as you can see, it's a relatively small ship and you have to put in the engine, battery pack, hydrolyzer units, and the sodium borehydride and the sodium boroxide tanks. Another project where we are involved in is the project Green Maritime Methanol. It's a project that has been running for 2 years now. It ends last year, and we're planning to have a second phase of the project. The first phase, it was with the Dutch consortium, Port of Rotterdam, ship owners like Van Oort, or ship wharves like Damen. And the focus was on the long-term strategy for the use of methanol, green methanol, as bunker fuel, supply chain development, regulations, the bunkering, and the first design of the pilots. The methanol is either bio-based. At this moment, that's available in the Netherlands. What we are working on at the moment is also to have a supply of synthetic methanol that's based on CO2, carbon capture storage or carbon capture usage, and hydrogen, green hydrogen. The last 2 years have been spent on the design of a few ships, on paper, mind you, and the testing of the combustion engines, if you could use them with methanol as fuel. The results were quite promising, so the idea is for the next phase to really start designing and the building of the ships. For ourselves, we did a small test on paper, of course, where we took one of our existing patrol vessels and researched if it is possible to have a retrofit. Technically, it might be possible because you could use the existing engine and put in a fuel tank for methanol. But the main problem with this ship is that it's relatively small, so to exchange the existing marine diesel tanks by tanks suited for methanol, we would have to lift off the top of the ship to access the tanks, because you can't use traditional maritime diesel tanks for methanol. So you need special tanks and you also need special pipeline infrastructure on board of the ship. So that's the reason why we decided for the retrofit not to go into the methanol solution. At the moment, we are studying as Port of Amsterdam a new build program for patrol vessels, and methanol, green methanol, mind you, is one of the possible solutions we are going to look into. But that will be new build. How to continue? Generally speaking, we have a parallel development of regional production and regional demand of green hydrogen. We're also working on the supply chain and the possible use of hydrogen infrastructure, connection on the national backbone and regional hydrogen pipeline infrastructure. We work on the development of the use of hydrogen as a clean fuel for shipping, as a bunker fuel, be it hydrogen, be it in any other form, like synthetic methanol, for instance. And we're working on original production of clean fuels based on hydrogen. We can't do this alone, I have to tell you, because as a Port Authority, we don't operate any commercial ships. That's done by local, by national, international market parties. We don't operate the bunker facilities in the ports. It's also done by commercial companies. So we will have to work very closely together with the markets, with universities for the further development, with the governments, regional, national, and EU governments for the regulations and the classification of the ships. I think now you see myself again, so I stop sharing.
Yes, Jan.
I give you a very short introduction about what we're doing at the moment as a Port Authority, with all the limited limitations about that, because we don't operate ships, we don't operate terminals, we don't produce hydrogen or green fuels, but we try to create an environment in our region together with all the stakeholders, so that you can develop these kind of clean fuels for shipping industry.
Obviously, I think it's a very collaborative approach. And yeah, Jan, we received a couple of questions, so if I will read this out for you, if you are comfortable, maybe you will be able to answer those. The question that I mentioned earlier, the availability of green hydrogen, is the production the main restriction?
At the moment it is, because as far as I know, most hydrogen which is available in Europe is grey hydrogen, as we call it, is produced from natural gas. There are projects which are looking in blue hydrogen that's still produced by gas, but then you have carbon capture storage so that you actually have a green type of hydrogen. But the green hydrogen projects we are working on in the port area are based on green electricity, so either from windmills or green sources. But that still is a challenge. There is hydrogen available, but if you have a stock of green hydrogen, you might easily sell it, to put it shortly. So there's lack of green hydrogen, actually.
And Jan, second question is methanol, which is a low flash point fuel. What safety measures or standards should be introduced or adapted if the use of methanol is increasing?
Methanol is already used by a ferry boat between Kiel and Gothenburg. So they did a lot of research there. And if you go back to the classification of barges, but also of sea ships, it's still challenging, because there are not a lot of regulations what the ship should apply to. If you talk about a ship, you see methanol has a low flash point, so you need special regulations. You need special adaptations for the machine room and the engine rooms. If there's a fire, you don't see it, so you have to need special equipment or sensors to show that there is a leakage of methanol. And for the bunkering of methanol, there's also a lack of regulations, and that has to be worked on. Generally speaking, bunkering of methanol is roughly as safe as bunkering of oil products.
Thank you, Jan, very much. Thank you for being here with us today and sharing some of your insights and expertise. Before we go, do you have any final comments or closing remarks to share?
Well, it's quite challenging, and if you talk with ship owners, you see that they are actually willing to invest, but they are still looking what will be the fuel for the future. And I don't think there will be one type of fuel which will be the future green fuel. I think it will be a palette of different types of fuels, green fuels, for the maritime industry, for barges and for sea ships, and that will largely depend on your sailing pattern. Do you do long distance, short distance? Are you regionally based? Those kind of challenges you have. And I can understand that at this moment, most ship owners are waiting how it will develop this market and what is the best fuel for their type of ships.
Understood. Thank you so much, Jan. Thank you for your presentation.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to next speaker, next presentation. Mira Yola, Finance and Port Digitalization, Port of Oulu. And the presentation is Port of Oulu's digitalization strategy for a smarter port project. Mira, whenever you are ready, the stage is yours. Hi, Mira.
Hello. Hello, Samantha. How are you?
Very good. And yourself?
Fine, thank you. So everything ready for our presentation from Northern Finland, Oulu?
Nice.
Okay.
You're gonna share.
Thank you.
You're gonna share the slides?
Yes. Just a moment. You see it now?
Yeah, I see the slides. You can put it in the
Presentation mode.
presentation
How about
mode.
now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
It's not yet in presentation mode. It's still on the.
Okay. Okay. So let's wait a few seconds. Is it coming?
No, I just see. Well, at least I see the slide, just normal slides, but not a presentation mode.
Okay. So what if I try to share my screen? Would it be better?
Look here at the bottom. You have 4 icons, and the third icon is the screen that takes you to application window. Screen should be better, I think.
Yes.
We had
Yes, and as I'm sharing it and having this presentation mode, it apparently you can see it in the same mode. Okay. So let's take one more try with the screen because I have this video in my presentation that I should have. How about now?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Mira Yola and I work in Port of Oulu as head of port digitalization and finance. And today I'm about to tell you all about our digitalization project called Port Oulu Smarter. And let's take a quick look at our location at the Bothnian Bay and this picture of our port here in northern Finland. We are a small and mid-sized Finnish port with a draft into sea channel of 12.5 meters and the biggest container port in the Bothnian Bay. And from here, let's skip straight to these digitalization topics. In a nutshell, what our Port Oulu Smarter projects is all about. We are building up this cloud-based port data platform on top of Microsoft Azure applications. And then we have all these user interfaces, which are mobile application and digital twin. And we are building this entity on top of our digital port infrastructure, which includes, for example, all these technical devices and like cameras and sensor on locally on our port area, and for example, network solutions, base stations, and other connectivity technology. And all this is enabling us as a port authority to provide a new type of digital services for our ecosystem partners on our area. And who are they? Obviously, we are on a maritime week, so port ecosystem partners are pretty much this group of companies and parties is pretty familiar for all the participants, but we have listed here because we want to make sure that our digital services as a port authority, they are meant to serve all these parties of our ecosystem. Stevedoring operators, their subcontractors, obviously all the visiting traffics coming in and out from our area, agencies and shipping companies, all the maritime operators as piloting, towing and ice breaking, obviously on our level, very much important service during winter time, safety and security operators, area maintenance and other construction project partners that we constantly basically have on our area when we are enlarging our port into the sea. Maintenance, customs and different type of authorities who are very much interested in what is going on and happening on our port area. And then we have this Nuottasaari industrial area behind the defense, in which we are collaborating very much, for example, with the security issues. And obviously, end customers and cargo owners are the most important group of customers to whom and whose logistics capabilities and competitive advantages we are improving in this digitalization projects. And then we have also listed in this list these digital development partners that we have been glad to have many new of them during these few last years when building up this these digital services. And we think as a port authority that when all these port operators and stakeholders work together in a best possible way, so that is the overall performance of our port, and we are trying to improve this collaboration as much as possible with these digital applications. In 2017, we created this digitalization strategy shown here in this big picture of the ship, and I highlighted some of the most important things since there is kind of lots of text in this picture. Obviously, we have vision for our digitalization strategy. We have drivers and targets. What are we trying to achieve? We are very much trying to improve the efficiency and reliability, visibility of all these logistics chain and flows that are going through our area. And then we are improving the safety and security of all employees and visitors visiting our area. And then we are very much taking care of sustainability and preserving environmental matters. And then we would like to even be profiled as this visionary development and very future-oriented port, if only possible. And we are using these modern and agile data teaming tools and techniques to do this. And in this digitalization strategy, we discovered these two very much important enablers, which are very much critical for any type of digital improvements. They are close cooperation within this port ecosystem and listed in the recent slide. And then we discovered that we need to have very modern and efficient network solutions locally on our area. And we even have invested in this private LTE mobile network with which has been ongoing now for about 2 years on our area. We have private LTE network utilized within these port solutions, and we as a port authority are selling the capacity of this private network, mobile network for these port operators. And then these actual digitalization projects, they are all about traffic and cargo flows. We are collecting data in advance about all these flows coming into our area, and this area also includes all these smart gate operations, access permits, and for example, things that are taking place on gate areas. We have video analytics applications there, and different type of object recognition and detection and that sort of things. And when the gates actually open and these visitors and these vehicles come to our area, there we are talking about the port area, inner port area performance. And here we have this very ambitious goal to build up this real-time digital situational awareness into our digital twin, and in a very realistic way. So we are gathering all kinds of information and providing this context to this digital twin platform, which I'm about to show you an example in this video. Yes, and by gathering all this information, we see that we can provide these digital services for our stakeholders. And here is an architecture picture of how is this all built up. In the center of all this is this cloud-based data hub, which I mentioned earlier. It's Azure based, and these data sources shown on the left side of this picture. We have built up these APIs from which we are collecting data into this data hub. There are operative ongoing systems, obviously, on our companies and for example, our own systems as a port authority. And then we are utilizing open data, port call data, weather conditions, and train calls, and that sort of things. And then we have these more local sensors, which are providing us information about the cargo flows and fleet flows and even of these conditions, and network status is also mentioned there, because that is one big part of our digital services at the moment, that this private LTE is ongoing well, and we are providing this status of this network via our applications. And then obviously when our area includes, there are several type of moving vehicles, this position tracking is very big part of this. We are identifying and giving navigation and instructions for them, and surveilling obviously the whole area. And we are utilizing video analytics, fixed and drones, which are cameras which are drone based. And then we are utilizing also this mobile application of ours to collect the user information. And then we have more like static information, for example, waste spot information and that sort of thing, documents and planning tools, that sort of things that we are providing for the end users. And there we are using this cloud-based document management system called M-Files. Yes, and all these APIs are bringing in this information, and we are utilizing and sharing it via a mobile application and our digital twin, which are shown in this picture in the right side. And this analytic icon above is all about analytics that we are providing by combining all these data brought in, and we are measuring and making measurements and KP, so calculating different type of KPIs and trends and that sort of things, which is the big picture in this, and we see a huge potential in this analytics and utilizing it in the future. And obviously all this data, it's all about historical data. We have certain use cases for real-time data, and then obviously the new thing is how to predict and make simulations and utilize in the planning all this data that we are gathering. So it's a big entity, and we have taken the first step, and we still have left time to go, but it's a good start. Okay, and now I'm about to show you this video about our digital twin platform. And as you can see here, this model is a 3D model of our port, and we are bringing in this very dynamic and real-time information and data about port operations, vehicles, vessels that are visiting us. And obviously we want to be able to provide a very good situational awareness and data about traffics for our end users. And we can also plan with this tool. We can see the pipelines underneath the ground and underneath the snow and ice here in Finland. We can bring in sensor data like shown here from our crane. It is drawing a heat map, and we can calculate KPIs out of it. We can simulate different type of lightning solutions, and as this model knows how the sun rises in Finland, we can see the very realistic views. And we can also plan these and optimize these camera views and plan then, and even if you had the access rights and there was this camera actually indeed here, you could push the icon and watch the stream. Yes, it's all about collecting this information, knowing exactly who is where on our area and how to contact them in case of emergency, for example. And we want to be able to provide this information via different type of end devices. Okay. So once more, kind of in a nutshell, we call this digital infrastructure that we are building on top of this very traditional role of ours as a provider of this physical infrastructure as a port authority. So how we see this digital infrastructure is that it's all about these connectivity solutions on area, and as I mentioned earlier, this private LTE solution, and we are also making 5G trials with universities and, for example, Nokia, a big company here, and different type of mobile net operators. And we see that all these, if you think about, for example, that digital twin video, we need to gather a huge amount of data and transfer it. So we see as a port authority that we need to be able to optimize all these mobile mobile networks locally, so that they are very much, every use case has the best solution for its use case, and optimize the entire big picture. And then we need to have these data sources. We want to own them, these devices pretty much, and build up these APIs so that we can sort of sit on top of them, and in that way we also own the data. And all this we are building up in a very let's say multi-operational way. We have multiple suppliers and cooperative companies building up, and because we want to be, we try to be and avoid vendor locks and technology locks as much as possible. That's our idea, and that is something that we see that is a competitive advantage for us also, so that it's kind of hard to this big pictures is kind of hard to copy in our main competitive ports. And we have built up this data platform on ourselves, and these user interfaces. We have just launched our mobile applications, and this digital twin use cases are taking place one step at the time with our customers and port operators. So that's about it on my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if they should appear.
Thank you very much, Mira. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. And I actually got to go on Finland's map and to see exactly where Oulu is located. I traveled in Finland a little bit before and had a chance to visit Port of Helsinki, but never Oulu. So it was really nice and personally very interesting to learn a little bit more about what's happening there.
Okay, sounds good. So we are here up in the north, so you should visit here in northern Finland as well. Sounds good.
Would be really nice. Thank you, Mira. Let me look at the questions that I have received. Okay, so this is a question that has been ongoing today, and we asked similar question to some of our previous speakers. So we spoke a lot about data solutions and technical solutions and things like that. Can you mention anything specifically how these technological advancements help with the environmental aspects as well?
Yes, there are one or two very good examples. For example, when collecting this position data out of and via our mobile applications. First of all, the truck driver has to apply for the access permit via a mobile application. And once he gets onto our area, we can locate him or her at the area, and we can provide instructions straight to the unloading spot. So obviously all this hassling and driving around the area is going to be minimized in this, and we can have this vision for this driver, and as these turning times will diminish, that is our very big goal. So we see that emissions reductions are about to happen for sure. Yes, this is one example.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other question I have is that you have when you were talking about your technology, and I realized how much of the actual technological aspects goes in all these digitalization projects that you do there. And I wonder how you choose your suppliers. How do you choose your vendors? Is there any kind of, what kind of processes do you use to select the best companies to partner up and work with?
Very good question. And it's one of the most important things to have these good collaboration parties. we have been lucky to have a very innovative and enthusiastic technology company here in Oulu area and Oulu region, and we are doing very much collaboration with universities and Finnish, what's it called, this governmental research center, VTT. So obviously these consortiums and larger projects, they kind of collect very interesting and enthusiastic firms and companies around them, and we've utilized those consortiums. And obviously it's all about getting to know people and companies and learning what kind of services do they have, and then and we are taking very small steps. That is one good advice for anyone considering this. Take very small steps, and quite frankly, it's easy to see after first 6 months that is this collaboration working well or not.
Thank you, Mira. And once again, collaboration is the word that summarizes all this conference. You know, yesterday all day we had so many speakers, and whenever we're going to sort of conclusions of whatever they are talking, we always had collaboration as a concept that really would move the industry forward. So thank you so much for that. Mira, that was all the questions that I had. Before we move on to the next speaker, do you have any final remarks or any closing comments?
Nothing specific. Thanks for having our presentation here in Maritime Week 2021, and thanks for all the participants, and have a safe Thursday.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mira. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you the next panel, looking to 2021 and beyond, adapting to the new normal and the impact on ports. And we have 3 speakers lined up here for you. Jan Hoffman, Chief Trade Logistics Branch Division on Technology and Logistics, UNTAD, Jordi Torrent, Head of Strategy, Port of Barcelona, and Giovanni Benedetti, Head of Marketing, Portuaria de Cartagena. Whenever you are ready, the stage is yours. Hello, Jan.
A wonderful good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, indeed.
Good. Yeah, welcome to Geneva. Very happy to be on this panel. Seems to be working everything okay. We now have to test the share screen. Mm-hmm. And I think let's go directly to the question you asked, looking to 2021 and beyond, some long-term trends. So I'll try out this other button here that says share screen, and it should now be working. And I will do the full screen.
Yes,
you can see the whole thing. Good. I will divide my presentation in 3 sections: BC, DC, and AC, like before Corona, during Corona, and after Corona, and look at some key long-term trends that I think are important for this panel. For the first one, I have 3 long-term trends. For the during Corona, I have 2 issues, and after Corona, also 2 issues. That makes 5. 10 minutes divided by 5 gives me 2 minutes per issue. Let me then rather start with my presentation. BC, before Corona, some long-term trends from our review of maritime transport, our statistics at the United Nations, hard data, not perceptions or polls, but really hard data on goods loaded, goods unloaded, like the loaded are the exports, unloaded the imports. Here you can see the share of the developing countries, and we see a really total shift, a totally different geography of trade for the ports of the world over the last decades. In the past, when we went to school, our teachers went to school and taught us that developing countries were exporters of raw materials. And that's true, high volumes, low volumes. So they exported more volume. You see the red bar is much higher than the blue bar. Today, developing countries also participate in globalized production, importing large volumes of raw materials and imports, and manufacturing then stuff, be it in China, but also Vietnam, Thailand, South Africa, Chile, and so on. Another long-term trend that is somewhat associated with this is what is then on the ships, like what is the type of cargo. And here again, here I've put it for you in a video, not me actually, it's my son, Julian, who did this. You can very nicely see here how in the past there was more liquid cargo than dry cargo. And year after year after year, the dry cargo, which is the dry bulk, the iron ore, the coal, but also, of course, the containerized cargo has increased its share. And among the liquid, the crude oil has actually gone down and other tanker has gone up. A third long-term trend, now looking at containers. And that is also something that's really affecting the container ports. We have heard a lot about the big ship, the challenge, the market power of the alliances. And here we can really see in one chart two sides of the same coin. We see how ship sizes have gone up. See, the red line is the largest container ship in TEU. It's indexed just to be able to compare apples and oranges. The largest ship. Also, the orange line is the average per port. Not every port gets the biggest ship, but even the biggest ships that go to the average port has gone up. The average size has gone up, the gray line. The total deployed capacity has not per port, these are averages, has not gone up quite as much. And mathematically, everything else being equal, this basically means you have to have fewer services, and services then go hand in hand with companies. So the green line shows how the number of companies has gone down. So I can show this to you also in a map. Here, every dot is a port, and the size of the dot is the size of the largest container ship. And you see how, on average, these have gone up. And you see also the color, the red dots are the ones in with the biggest container ships, and these have gone up, mostly Asia, Europe, but also a bit on the US. The same, now not on a map, but here the distribution, you can see how the median size, the mean, the average size, and also the maximum size has increased year. This is quarterly data, quarter after quarter after quarter. See, the maximum size has gone up. I am quite proud that we can do this. Thank you to MDS Transmodal and UNCTAD for the data, and to Julian for this nice chart. So the other side of the coin, same map, but now you will see how the size of the dots is going down. It's decreasing. This is the number of companies providing services from and to each port. And because of mergers and alliances, not so much, it's mergers here, and also that some companies may have been kicked out, some went bankrupt, but overall, the numbers have gone up. And again, here also the same as the distribution. Here we start with almost 100 as the biggest number. That was in Singapore in 2006. And then quarter after quarter, the mean and the largest number goes down. The median, the 50% point, actually has remained constant at 3. So the 50% of ports receive 1, 2, or 3 companies that provide services from and to the port. So these were 3 key trends I think are interesting. Some of this data I think is new. So you hope you enjoyed this. So now what's happened during Corona? In our review, we talk about shock waves through supply chains, shipping, and ports. And while we wrote our review of maritime transport, which was published in November, we actually had to update and adjust our forecast. We thought, okay, now COVID is bad. Of course it's bad. And while we read what others estimated, forecasted, and there were some estimates that said it was really, really going down the volume of maritime trade. Then we come with our forecast. We projected a decrease of minus 4.1% in 2020. But just after we published it, more data came in, and the real downturn is probably not quite as bad as we had thought. So the really interesting question for me is not so much why did it decline, but why did seaborne trade not decline more? There are 4 points here. One is the GDP trade ratio, trade in goods, has changed, and a lot of the GDP these days is in services, and the COVID crisis accepted above all the services, the restaurants, the movies, the tourism, the hairdressers, and so on. The second point is that companies somewhat increased inventory holdings because all of a sudden they realized, this just-in-time delivery in times of crisis and needing resilience is not that good. Third point, thank you, dear ports, thank you, maritime industry, you responded quite successfully to the challenges. And fourth and last point, what do you and I do when we are stuck in home office and in lockdown? A lot of goods actually have increased, a lot of trade in goods. So we buy more stuff through e-commerce and so on. So that's why seaborne trade has not gone down quite as much as we might have thought when the crisis started. Another more recent question, why did freight rates go up so much? The main routes have changed. Boxes, containers, empty boxes were not where they were needed. Carriers skipped port calls, boxes were left behind. Empty boxes are now missing. That is why freight rates are so high. There is the COVID impact. There's handling in ports, hinterland slows down. Their boxes held up on waiting trucks, on waiting ships, and so on. To some extent, there's a vicious cycle. Those who need containers hold on to them because it's a bit like when there was people talking about there's not enough toilet paper, everybody bought toilet paper. So there we are, people holding onto their containers. Trade imbalance worsened. There, you have seen how China got out of the crisis much quicker. Exports, and the US is importing, so empty boxes are specifically missing in China. And then last but not least, there is some discussion, criticism. Could it be that carriers benefit from the high rates? Of course they do benefit. And who is really looking for solutions? There's certainly a strong market power for carriers. So these were two key trends with some data during Corona. And now let me look at what's the new normal in our review of maritime transport. I can later on send the link also in the chat. So we have this quite detailed report with 6 key issues, how the new normal, the next normal is different about trade, the economy, digitalization, data, resilience, and climate change. Let me focus on 2 of them, digitalization and climate change. Who leads the IT reforms in your company? The CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? Well, in many countries, it's COVID-19 that pushes for new reforms, new motivations, new digitalization efforts. So we have a policy brief here on along the supply chain from ship to port, leaving the port, transit, and so on. Just one key point here. The concrete measures proposed in our policy brief help to facilitate both. They facilitate trade and they protect the population. It's a wrong picture that you may have seen sometimes when you look at customs officers. Oh, we have to be careful, there's a trade-off. No, pre-arrival processing, risk management, electronic payments, advanced rulings, post-clearance audits, what have you. All the measures we propose help achieve both. The negotiation, ratification, implementation of conventions take time. We need to commit to whatever is the best future technological solution. How to set today the rules for the future of maritime transport? I like to say technological progress will never be as slow as today. I'm optimistic about future solutions. I like to show here one document of the International Maritime Organization that was written by me 26 years ago when I worked for the IMO. I believe it was the first time that the internalization of costs was mentioned in an IMO document. At least nobody has so far could show me an earlier document. And that leads me to my last point here, that the technology advance that we have heard by Jan Egbertsen, for example, we've seen interesting presentations. The technology is advancing, and it is today possible, in our three last quick charts, about the emissions that can be assigned to ships, and it can be assigned to the ship type, to the flag, to the owner, to the trade, and it is possible to internalize externalities. It's possible to assign. Not easy, but it is something which I believe is the way to go. You see here that the three big ship types, bulk carriers, container ships, tankers, in the blue bar, they are in total the ones emitting more. If you look at it per ship, some vessel types have more emissions, like cruise ships and LNG tankers. One could see on the positive side that the fleet has expanded more than the emissions. So the lines, the not dotted lines here that are above in the chart, they have increased more than the dotted lines, which show the emissions. So the ships have become more efficient, more fuel efficient, emitting less per ton mile, but there's still a total increase, while the IMO goal is to have and achieve a total decrease. So I think it is important, and we are proud that we could show this in our review. You can assign emissions to countries, for example, to the flag state, and I believe this is the way to go. There's a potential for ports, of course, to help with this energy transition, to provide the new energies, to provide also incentives, perhaps. There are already now flag states, there's a Green Port Initiative. So I think this is the biggest challenge for shipping over the next decades, the energy transition. 40% of the cargo is energy. It's coal, it's oil, it's gas. So it's a huge transition where, we try to support this with this type of analysis. Thank you very much. I'll now then stop sharing the screen. There I should be back with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jan. So now either Jordi or Giovanni, any of you would like to take turn?
I'll go if it's okay for you. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can see you and we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so I just have one slide to show to make things easier. So let me try to share the slide. Let me see if I see it.
At the bottom, you have 4 icons, and if you click
I see it. I see it.
Yeah,
okay.
That should.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess you can see it right now.
It's coming. Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. I cannot see myself, so anyway, I will speak with the slide.
Can you please put it in the slideshow mode so we see the slide only?
You see the slide only?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay. Now maybe you can see me, no? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I have 10 minutes. We almost, I think this is almost the last session of the conference. I'm very happy to speak after some people I know very well. Christine, who might be sleeping from Vancouver, and now Jan. And let me try to go fast. I have made some, I guess this can work a little bit, I don't know, like a closing session of this conference, maybe. I'm not sure if there's any other after this panel. But anyway, I have tried to sum up a little bit following the title of the session, looking to 2021 and beyond, and I might go over some things that Jan already mentioned before. But before going into the beyond, let's see what has happened the last year. So pretty fast. First, when COVID-19 started, we all asked ourselves if this was going to be a game changer or an accelerator. I think we all I guess we all agree now that this probably has acted more as an accelerator of things that were already happening than a game changer, digitalization, changes in mobility, changes in the automotive industry, etc., etc. The second question we asked ourselves in Barcelona, that we were working when this when the COVID outbreak happened, we were working on our new strategic plan. We asked, how is this going to impact demand, basically, and what we saw maybe was that this was the culmination maybe of what we were seeing since the financial crisis of 2008, which was maybe the end of this, what we call, some people call the old golden era of, and I'm speaking a lot from an European perspective, I apologize, but the end of this golden area of 30 years of continuous increase, sometimes with double digits of foreign trade, European foreign trade. So maybe this is, after the financial crisis, the end of this global golden era, and we are heading towards an area of stagnation, maybe, of foreign trade, or very, very small increases, from a European perspective. Another thing which is funny a little bit, when you take part in some conferences which are not from our sector, they say, this COVID has proven that international supply chains are not reliable, and what proximity should be promoted. I'm not against proximity, but I would say that this outbreak of the COVID has proven the opposite, I think, which is that global supply chain, I would say, that are extremely or very efficient. We haven't seen, in general, and shortages of goods in supermarkets, in shops, in only if we speak about masks, and the reaction was quite fast. So I would say that this crisis has shown the robustness of global supply chain. In cities like Barcelona, I think this crisis also shown to the population how important logistics and ports are, and so there's more consciousness about the importance of ports and logistics. And during the worst times of the lockdown back in March, April, the only things that really worked were hospitals, grocery shops, and ports and logistics. So I guess people now are more aware in our cities of the importance of ports. Very important also to stress that diversification in ports is an important factor when you think about promoting prosperity in our communities, and that we have to go even more in depth in this direction, and maybe that we should get used to living in a world where global disruptions are every day more frequent, not only because the outbreak of COVID-19, also because cyber attacks, trade wars. So maybe we have to get used to a world of global disruption and more frequent global disruptions. So what's ahead of us in the coming year and years? As I said, we see COVID as an accelerator of things that were happening before. If we look at it from a demand perspective, first and foremost, e-commerce is gonna, whether we like it or not, is gonna be the normal in almost all sectors and segments. I hope this doesn't destroy completely the network of small shops in our cities, but in lots of sectors, it's going to become the new normal. And since March, you see old population that never used e-commerce now using it very often. So people whether we like it or not, have gotten used to e-commerce in all types of products. European foreign trade has grown for many different reasons, but we had to mention three very important factors for the growth of the last 30 years. Fossil fuels, containerization, automation. These are not going to be the driving forces of foreign trade, European foreign trade, for the coming years, or at least for the growth that you can see. And this will come from other sectors: e-commerce, again, e-mobility, telecom, hardware, not software, hardware, agro-food, exchanges with Africa and Southeast Asia, RoRo, etc., etc. On the short term, and this is a personal opinion, and doesn't represent the Port of Barcelona opinion, I don't think we're going to see the total recovery of the figures of trade of 2019 till a couple of years ahead. In Barcelona, we had a decrease of 12% of import-export in 2020, so it might take as long as vaccines work and there's no other pandemics, etc. A couple of years, 2022, 2023. No? A very important sector that is not mentioned, only has been mentioned in this conference only from an environmental perspective, which is the cruise industry, very important for the economy of some cities. If vaccines work, there's no other outbreaks or variants of the COVID that are resistant to vaccines. Let's hope this industry can start again from spring and a lot from summer, and very important for turnaround ports like Barcelona, for different industries. And from an offer perspective, also whether we like it or not, I don't see a change in the pattern of further concentration or at least further alliances when it comes to sharing vessels, sharing line rotations, etc., at least in the container business. Obviously, a big push again towards digitalization and automation, and again a new push or a bigger push towards energy transition based on three main topics. One, increased efficiency, both on the land side and on the sea side. OPS in ports, development on onshore port supply in ports. Today, if you exclude California and some Canadian ports, Vancouver, for instance, and Scandinavian countries, this is still very not neglectable, but very it's not very significant elsewhere. And I think we're going to see the next 2-3 years, at least, for instance, Barcelona, we have taken decisions to invest irrespective of what the evolution of the shipping industry. So we're going to see this even more in the coming years. And another thing very important, what we say, differentiation to avoid commoditization. When we look at our market, at the Spanish market, and you look at a company, for instance, in the capital in Madrid, every day it is easier to change the port offer, to change from one port to the other between Algeciras, Valencia, Barcelona, and the same happens from a location in southern France to change between Antwerp, Marseille, and Barcelona, for instance. So you have to differentiate, to innovate very fast if you want to be selected as the port of in order to for importers, exporters, logistics operators. So differentiation to avoid this commoditization. Port-centric logistics for many years, and not only in Barcelona. We have ports authorities, and in general terminals we have we tended to exclude from the port terminals activities that were not directly oriented to loading and unloading vessels, and maybe in the next coming years we're going to see some activities of deconsolidation of containers, etc., going back into the ports and into the terminals. This is what is called port-centric logistics. So this might be a trend that could be returning in the coming years. Obviously, as I said, increased pressure in order to reduce the carbon footprint of the shipping industry. Very important. I didn't see we discussed this on today's session. Maybe yesterday you did, but the freight prices that we see today, particularly in the container business, are not sustainable on the long term. The prices we saw at the end of last year, beginning of this year. So this has to go down necessarily. I think, I don't know how much, but this is not sustainable, I guess, on the not medium but on the short term. So we're going to see, I guess, reduction of freight prices, and now even something more recent with the change in the US, and this more on the medium term, might have an effect on the medium term now with the changes in the US government. We might see again that in some countries where protectionism was taking place and was being used again, like 50, 60, 70 years ago, this might change again, and all the big economies might look again towards liberalization, which is, there's little to do in terms of liberalization. Almost everything has been quite a lot liberalized, but I guess protectionism, as it happened during the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, might go back again as it did a few decades ago. So this is a summary, maybe too fast, but given that we have 10 minutes, I try to focus on those 10 minutes of what we have seen in the last year, since the first outbreak of COVID in Europe, at least, and what we expect for the coming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from an European perspective, and I insist from a Barcelona perspective, which might be different from other positions in Europe or elsewhere. So I think I would leave it here, and thank you, Samantha, and all for listening.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you. Should we leave questions to the end of the panel?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Giovanni, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I will just try to share my screen now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. So this should be
the third icon on the bottom, which looks like a TV screen.
That's right. I'm there, and I'm trying to go to share.
Application window.
I don't.
The second tab would be application.
Okay, I got it. I got it. There we go. That's right.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah, and you can put it now in slideshow, please.
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
So it's there pretty well. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me today. Good afternoon to you. Good morning for me. Let's get started. Well, I'm in Cartagena, Colombia, not in Cartagena, Spain. Just to give you a perspective, we're located in the north coast of the Caribbean, Colombia, just about 270 nautical miles from Panama and about 1,100 miles from Miami, just to give you a perspective of our geographic location. A little about our city. Our city is a city port. It was founded by the Spanish Main in 1533, only with the purpose to serve as a port. Today is the most important port in Colombia, and the city holds about 1.4 million inhabitants. Basically, it holds the most important export industrial zone of Colombia, and is the petrochemical cluster of Colombia. Just to give you like a brief idea, Cartagena, FOB-wise, manages about 65% of the exports of Colombia and about 42% of the imports CIF. And of course, it's the most important touristic city in Colombia. Coming to a brief view of our port, we do not have a scheme like in Europe or US. We don't have like a port authority that encompasses all the activity of the Cartagena Bay. We have several authorities, and basically the red dots that you see in the Cartagena Bay are the terminals that we operate within the bay. But to give you an idea, the Cartagena Bay holds about 17 different terminals that are engaged in international trade, and it's a wide arrangement of different type of cargoes and commodities like containers, oil, gas, coal, petrochemicals, cement, grain, of course, roll-on activity, cruises, and general cargo. And some yearly figures is about 64 million tons of cargo per year, 3.2 million TEU, about 500,000 passengers, just roughly over 5,000 ocean-going vessels per year, and about 150,000 autos and roll-on, roll-off operations per year. It's a deep natural port, and currently the largest vessels calling our facility are from the oil side, the very large crude carriers, about 240,000 deadweight ton, and container-wise, just the largest new Panamax of nearly 15,000 TEU capacity. And in terms of magnitude, Cartagena is the 10th most active container port in the Americas, just roughly with the 2019 figures, about 2.9 million TEU. Last year it was about 3.2 million TEU. In general, Cartagena is a large hub for the region. So about 72% of our container activity is basically transshipment operations. And just to wrap up with the introduction, we, as the group Port of Cartagena, we are a private company operating 3 facilities in the Cartagena Bay, mainly concentrated into operations of containers, roll-on, roll-off, cruise facilities. And we do as well operate some tugs, and more are getting into the business of warehousing and logistics. We have been operating since December 1993. That's 27 years now. And basically we operate 24/7. Our yearly revenue about $300 million. We have a little more over 1,000 employees, and we are a non-union port facility. A little view of our Manga terminal that has about a 1.8 million TEU capacity, and a little view of our Contecar facility that has about a 3.2 million TEU yearly capacity. So, coming to the main concern of our meeting today, is okay. How do we see 2020 and beyond? And I will say that maybe Jordi was saying something that we see no end in sight yet. We believe that the roller coaster is still rolling, and and all this let's say COVID-19 has been like going up when you stress up, going down very fast with a lot of uncertainty, trying to do early adaptations to the first problems that you encounter. Then, of course, new structural changes that will take place, and then trying to level off for whatever new normal we will encounter. We yet are still to see what new surprises will 2021 or 2022 will bring to us. So pretty much we feel we are rolling the roller coaster just now. A little of what happened to us in Cartagena and the impacts that we received in 2020. Well, cruise activity down 80% of our activity basically came to an end. So that meant 400,000 less passengers, about 260 less cruise calls. We basically received the last cruises in about March last year. And actually, the first COVID passenger that came to Cartagena came on board the cruise. Later on, the roll-on, roll-off activity was as well 45% down due to the lockdown. No autos were being sold in Colombia. So that meant that we saw 75,000 less autos going through our facilities and about 85 less roll-on, roll-off calls. Curiously, I will say curiously, because container activity actually went up 6.5%. So in the first view, we will say that we ended well. I mean, but it's a kind of a tricky number, because imports actually went down 10%, despite exports went up 5%, and transits up 8%. But the economic activity related to our port basically stated that our EBITDA came down 20 million. And this is basically because import boxes are the boxes that actually pay better and add more revenue to our economical statement sheet. And while we were adapting to this reality of the COVID, we ended coming to some priorities. And of course, our first main priority was to guarantee health to our labor and their families. So we rapidly came up with about 45% of our people working from home. And working from home sounds easy, I mean, to say it, but you needed to finance their families with all the electronic equipment and connectivity. And then again, trying to change all of our work practices at our facilities. Transport from buses to private cars, how do they eat, eating individually, individual bathrooms, social distancing, permanent testing. So it was a real challenge to change the work practices to our operational people. And we did understand that guaranteeing health to our labor and their families will guarantee service level to our customers. So I may say that as of today, we have not had one single fatality in our labor. Everybody has been able to work. Very, very few of our labor personnel has ended in the hospital. But that allows us to basically provide adequate service level to our customers, to maintain the productivity. And of course, it was a challenge to change and adapt new procedures. I always say kind of as of a joke that one of the best politicians in Colombia was basically COVID-19. And this was basically because we ended avoiding a lot of stamps, a lot of papers that were there only because of bureaucracy. So this allows us the international trade actually to flow much better. And we ended having a much wider array of and availability of electronic transactions. Then later on, we're constantly rethinking ourselves, designing new services, and then, of course, accelerating the implementation of new technologies. For example, remote operation of RTGs, which are under trial and testing just now. And why not? They can be operated from home and by women, and maybe they will not operate one RTG, but 2 or 3, depending on that. Also, less intrusive inspections, more X-ray, gamma rays machines going there, so less and less people actually coming to the facility, as well as remote video accessibility for stuffing and stripping operations. In the past, we required delegates from the cargo owners to be present in this type of operations in order to avoid claims. So we really think that the main role of a port has to change, and basically today is to facilitate trade. So a constant question to us comes in: how, as a terminal operating company, what are we doing in order to facilitate trade to our country, to our customers, and to all the region? I will say that one of the things that we're putting a lot of effort is when I told you in the beginning that we were a hub, important hub for carriers in the Caribbean. So we're dedicated to be a hub as well for distribution centers and multinational facilities. Today we operate ourselves, not the city, over 60,000 square meters in hubs for Decathlon. For example, the stores in Chile or Peru or even US are being served by our facilities here in Cartagena, where we receive their products from Morocco, from China, from France, from whatever their plants are. And this we are basically doing more and more and more for different companies. It works pretty well. Another issue, very important, considering that the Caribbean is a set of lot of different small economies, we have been developing to create less than container load cargos, and we started with DSB Panalpina, opening the first hub operation in Latin America from Cartagena. So we are able to serve all of these small economies, bringing parcel cargos from all the continents and rebanning them again and send them to countries like Haiti, Barbados, Trinidad, just to give you like an idea. Of course, there's a lot of technologies going on, and one of the questions that we ask ourselves is, okay, how will all of these new technologies will impact our port, our company, trade, operations, and logistics? So yes, we saw a huge rise of e-commerce, and today we're working in the creation of a digital channel directly from our port servers, where all of these small shippers can have access in a one-stop shop for trucking services, custom house brokerage, stuffing or stripping, empty container delivery return, even finance or insurance. So they don't have to contract all of these operations one by one. They can actually go and have a lot of transparency, a single cost, and we, as the port, as a terminal operating company, will basically provide a peace of mind and facilitate their way to trade, especially if they're very small companies trading less than 20, 50 containers per year. Another issue that we're working is the possibility to develop a fulfillment center right from the port. So for example, we receive a lot of electronics from Samsung or Xiaomi, or liquids from Diageo or Decathlon. So you can actually go home, and right from home, you can order in your computer, and basically you'll receive your new TV set or your bottle of wines directly from the port to your home. So this basically avoids going to third-party DCs and having your cargo running around and around and around, just losing time and effort. So this is something that we're working pretty well, and we hope to launch it by the end of this year. So to wrap up my presentation, I will say that we as a port, we need to reinvent ourselves. And basically, we have always been seen as an infrastructure and vessel operators. And we need to shift basically our operations to be known as information and cargo solutions company. So there's a lot of new partners there, new rules yet to come. But I believe that we need to get on track and try to avoid thinking that we are a premise with some borders or some real hard steel working issues, and more into the software part. That's all for now. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. Thank you, Jan and Jordi. We have received some questions, but maybe before we move to those, you have some questions to each other, or maybe comment on each other's presentations?
I think Jordi speaks, but is muted. So in the meantime,
yeah, he's muted. Yeah.
Happy to see you, and congratulations to the two very lovely ports.
Thank you, Jan.
I think it was a good sequence. We had some long-term trends, and then two success stories that I think respond to those trends.
That's right. We have seen that, Jan, the vessel growing and growing. Now the next stage will be to widen again the Panama Canal, I'll say, in order to keep up with that.
Yeah.
We're not hearing Jordi. Jordi, you're muted.
Moving, Jordi, but we cannot hear you.
It should work, Jordi. You probably just...
At the bottom, there's a little microphone you have to click, so...
you probably tried. Okay, so while we try to figure that out, allow me to read the questions that I have received from our audience. So I'm not sure who this is exactly for, but let me take it as it comes. What are the key drivers of the adaptation to a new normal? Attitudes, technologies, or policies? Jordi mentioned all of these, but perhaps there are certain aspects that stand out specifically. This is an open question to you all, and you all may have different opinions.
Well, I will try to take that one, but I believe all of the elements that are considering the questions are valid. Sometimes, regrettably, we have, always, at least in Colombia, we see that policies are lacking velocity of change. So technology is available there, everything is there, but then we're lacking policy to make them a reality. So you may have a great attitude, you may buy technology, you may do everything very quickly, but you will always encounter the difficulties with politics at the end of the road. And this is something that we need to sometimes teach our own politicians that needs to move quickly and to adapt these new technologies as fast as we can, because are for the benefit of our own economy.
I think Giovanni said quite nicely the most important politician was was COVID, no? Or in my PowerPoint, I had the like, who pushes for change? It's COVID, and we have a lot of additional requests for our work at UNCTAD, be it on customs automation, single windows, trade information portals, during the time of COVID. But on the bigger picture, I'm not sure if the question was in this direction, but of course, the big challenge the world faces is that a lot of these challenges concern public goods. We all benefit from less climate change or more cybersecurity or many things, but who would be the first one willing to pay and invest in this? Who would voluntarily pay more for their fuel? I don't know if I ask Samantha and Giovanni, who are left, and Jordi just maybe he reconnects. Have you ever voluntarily paid a little more when you bought your flight ticket? Because you can tick and then you pay a little more when you buy your flight ticket to compensate for the carbon emissions. I have recently actually done it just for the principle, because I'm working on it for UNCTAD. I'm working on assessing the impact, promoting decarbonization in shipping. And so, yeah, for my good conscience and for the sake of being able to say so now in front of you, I have clicked and paid a little more. But it does. So it has to be a global decision. And now we have a different government in the United States, but even with this government and with many national governments, agreeing on a global, for example, levy or on a global fund that somehow compensates and pays for global public goods, it's really difficult. It's a problem of the commons.
I will say that that's an interesting approach, Jan, but when you can buy in tickets, you can buy sometimes at $400 Cartagena, Europe, and sometimes $4,000. So you say, what are the drivers behind that as well? It's not only fuel, but other issues are being stressed in the tickets. So typically, I don't know if you will be willing always to pay a little more just because of a greener environment.
Exactly. Unless I'm obliged to pay, I don't pay.
Yeah.
So if you don't pay, well, then you keep burning fuel because it's cheaper, no? And
That's
others pay. Somebody is always paying. It's not that at this moment people who are flooded in Bangladesh are paying, or who have the hurricane in St. Lucia in Bahamas, or people whose crops fail in Mali. There are people already paying. It's not that it's free. Yeah?
That's right.
Emissions are not free. It's just that those who pollute don't pay.
Jordi.
I'm not sure you can hear me. No.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. I lost the 2-3 last minutes, so I'm not sure what you were discussing. Before I got mute, I don't know. I just wanted to say that I was very happy to see that from the other corner of the world, no, from Colombia, some reflections that we have done here in Barcelona in the last couple of years, no, they are going on the same direction. No, when I saw how to serve companies like Decathlon and Alibaba and things like that, I think some things we are thinking similarly, no, from two very different regions, no, and I liked it a lot, Giovanni.
Thank you, Jordi. Next time I'm near Barcelona, we'll give you a visit and discuss it deeper.
On the opposite as well.
That's right. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I have a question from one of our viewers. John Key is asking, what is the panel's views on Amazon effect over the next few years on the port sector? Port to door is quite an interesting place for them to start playing, perhaps.
That's a difficult question. That's for the other two. So specifically on Amazon, was Amazon mentioned in the question, or was it more generally door-to-door?
I will say, actually, and I can say it because I have had a few meetings with Amazon themselves, and actually, Amazon, you see Amazon as a single company, but Amazon at the end is a bunch of different companies. So when I'm developing, and what I was sharing with you, developing the fulfillment center in the port, I'm actually competing with Amazon as a fulfillment center for other companies. So to some extent we compete, and to some extent we cooperate. So it's kind of a dual issue, and it's a coin with two sides, depending on what type of Amazon you're actually talking to. So I believe that Amazon as a trading portal can be your customer, but you as a fulfillment center, you will actually be competing with Amazon per se. And then you'll need to divide the type of products that will be available. So some of them are everything that is cheaper, big, heavy, is easier to handle directly from the port, depending if the inventory is actually coming from international companies that are placing in advance an inventory in Colombia. It's not the trader, the one that is actually owning that inventory. So it's a mixed bag, I will say. It's kind of interesting question anyhow.
I'd like to say just a couple of things, because I think there's people waiting now for the next session. But no, from demand perspective, not only Amazon, we as a port, and I'm speaking about the port community, who have been forced to change a lot of things because of e-commerce, no? And it was not Amazon the first one. The first one was companies like Inditex, no? You all know Inditex, no? They forced lots of procedures from the port to be changed. Connectivity between rail and the seaside, digital processes, informing in advance of certain things. So we are being forced by, and Amazon might not be the biggest example, but companies like Inditex, Decathlon that you mentioned, Giovanni, and other companies that work with e-commerce, Mango, that sells 25% of its goods on e-commerce. So we're being forced to change. And the second big question I would say, and I'm not going to answer it because I don't know it, is if companies like Amazon or other similar companies are one day going to enter really the industry, the shipping industry. We're going to see new players such as Amazon or others. I don't know, but we may in the coming years. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe one thought on this also. The slides and these movies I had about two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, getting bigger, and I think one fear and criticism of Amazon is it's getting bigger. It charges very high margins for themselves and pays very little to the book producers, for example, and so on. So there is some fear of monopolistic markets. On the other hand, being big has advantages for energy efficiency, say the big ships and other things. Network, you go full one way, come back empty the other. If you're big and able to combine networks, it's better. The whole issue of data exchange, if you have vertical integration, it's easier. So there are advantages of being big, but the challenge is that these advantages, these better productivity, these lower costs, more fuel efficiency, are passed on to the client. And there we need ever more, I believe, strong competition authorities. We need transparency. Yeah. We need, these are the two things. We need transparency, that the client also has choices, can look at it. It's difficult to prohibit this type of this process that leads to strong market leaders.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Giovanni and Jordi, for your comments. We would love to continue the discussion, but we do have other speakers lined up. So before we go, do you have any final comments or any closing remarks that you would like to share with us?
Well, thank you for the kind invitation, Samantha.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jordi, Giovanni, for joining.
Okay, Jan.
You continued.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All the best.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the next speaker for a case study, San Pedro Bay Port's Clean Air Action Plan. And the speaker is Lisa Wunder, Marine Environmental Manager, Port of LA. Lisa, whenever you are ready, the stage is yours.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Let me try to share my screen.
You have a TV set icon at the bottom of the screen, if you can try there. Okay, I can see it's coming now.
Okay, thank you. So let me do a slideshow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Lisa Wonder. I am an environmental manager at the Port of Los Angeles. And I know our previous speakers just spoke a little bit about looking forward in the future to 2021. I'm going to go back a little bit in time and talk about the beginnings of the San Pedro Bay Port's Clean Air Action Plan. It was created as a joint effort between the Port of Los Angeles, where I work, and the Port of Long Beach, which is the port, a separate port, but located right adjacent to the Port of Los Angeles. So very quickly, these are the mobile source emissions at pretty much every port. We have ships, trucks, trains, hovercraft, and cargo handling equipment. And many people ask us about the beginnings of our Clean Air Action Plan and what motivated us to move forward with the Clean Air Action Plan. And I like to look at this particular graphic for that. And a lot of people misinterpret this graphic, so I want to spend a brief moment on it. This graphic was generated by our South Coast Air Quality Management District, and it shows a comparison of pollution in Los Angeles between 1998 and 2005. And this shows that in many areas of Los Angeles, as shown in the green, the air quality was improving during that time. But there was one area, noted in the very deep, dark purple toward the bottom, that the air pollution was getting much, much worse. And that was directly at the areas of the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. During this time, we had much increase in cargo and business. So this garnered the interest of not only our regulatory agencies, but many community groups, stating factually that these areas were also low-income areas where many of the inhabitants were disadvantaged communities and people of color. So with this new interest toward the port, we needed to make a statement to show that we could move forward and grow our port, but also show that we were going to do it in an environmentally responsible way. So in 2006, we developed our Clean Air Action Plan with the goals of minimizing our health risk, reducing our share of the mass emissions in the South Coast Air Quality Basin, being able to develop, being able to enable port development to move forward with new projects in a green manner, and develop source-specific standards. Our initial plan in 2006 was very successful, so we created an update in 2010, and in that update we published some standards and some goals. First was to reduce cancer-weighted risk by a surrogate of a diesel particulate matter reduction by 85% by 2020, and also reducing oxides of nitrogen, oxides of sulfur, and reducing diesel particulate matter with specific goals by 2014 and also by 2023. We also had a second update released in November 2017 where we added greenhouse gas goals and new zero emission goals, which I will expand upon here. We publish we track our progress with annual emission inventories. We have published them now for 15 different years, and this is to show the public our progress. We separate it out by ships, hovercraft, cargo handling equipment, trucks, and locomotives, look at many different pollutants. And very importantly, we have local, state, and federal environmental agencies review and sign off on our methodology and report every year, so we can show that these reports are valid and accurate. And our success story to date, Since 2015, these are our 2019 numbers. We have reduced diesel particulate matter down 87%, oxides of nitrogen down 62%, oxides of sulfur down 98%, greenhouse gases down 15%, and all this time while having a 25% increase in TEUs. And I want to note the boundary is not just at the port. For ships, we go, and for trucks and trains, we go out to the outer boundary of our South Coast Air Basin, which is over 100 miles. So these are not just emissions at the port; these are regional emission reductions resulting from improvements in port operations. So some of our new programs are some of the programs that we are expanding upon. We have a vessel speed reduction program within 40 nautical miles. It pretty much is a financial incentive to shipping lines that simply slow down to 12 knots or less as they enter near the port. This is a huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and savings in fuel for the ship operators as well. And we have a very high compliance with this. Again, it's a voluntary program where shipping lines receive a financial reward. And both at 20 nautical miles and 40 nautical miles, we are nearing toward the high 90% compliance. We also have more shore power plugins than any other port in the world with 26. And in addition, we have tested the first two bonnet technologies, which is an alternate to shore power. The bonnets, I don't have a picture of it here, unfortunately, but the pictures look pretty much there's a contraption that comes over the bonnet and takes the pollution from the bonnet and treats it on a barge. We also have our very famous Clean Truck program. Our initial Clean Truck program took the trucks and required trucks to be phased in over a few years so that now all the trucks that come to the Port of Los Angeles are 2007 or newer. Our future Clean Truck program is a transition to a completely zero emission truck fleet by 2035. And we've already moved forward with that with current trucks going current new trucks that come into our system need to be a 2010 or newer model year. Similarly, we also look for zero emission cargo handling equipment by 2030 and to limit idling until then at all our terminals. Additional updates from our 2017 CAP update is use of on-dock rail. We already have on-dock rail at all our terminals. We're looking to expand and increase the use of on-dock rail. Accelerated deployment of cleaner hovercraft vessel engines. Encourage improvements in freight efficiencies. Develop additional recognition for our terminals. And ensure that we have that electrical infrastructure that's available to support the use of these cleaner technologies. I want to take a moment also to talk about some of our grant projects. We currently, on all our terminals, we have 78 pieces of clean technology equipment, either being demonstrated or fully operating, operating on fuels such as battery electric, fuel cell, hydrogen, and CNG and LNG as well. First, in the upper left, we have our Green Omni Terminal project. We received $10.3 million from the California Energy Commission to do that project. It shows how different electric equipment can work self-sufficiently at the port, at a particular terminal. And it not only has environmental benefits, but it shows how a port can operate off the grid in case of an emergency or disaster, because there is a solar rooftop array and battery storage that is used to power electric tractors, electric trucks, and a barge emission control system. So that's one of our demonstration projects that we are getting close to wrapping up. We have about another year of demonstration on that. Then to the right, our Shore to Store project, we received a $41 million grant from the California Air Resources Board. There are our partner Toyota and Kenworth are developing and starting to deliver 10 hydrogen electric Class 8 trucks. We also have Shell fueling stations building 2 hydrogen fueling stations, and there are also electric yard tractors at the Port of Hueneme that are partnering with the Port of Los Angeles on this. So a very exciting project looking at hydrogen and also serving our whole region. Down at the bottom left, we have a cargo handling equipment demonstration at our Everport terminal, where we're demonstrating several different pieces of electric and natural gas yard tractors. And on the right bottom, we have our AID project, where we received $7.8 million from the California Energy Commission, where it is going to be a charging station, an inductive charging station, where trucks are going to be able to roll onto the charging station and receive a charge while they're queuing in line. So that's just an example of some of the advanced technology practices we have going on at the Port of Los Angeles. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Sorry, my computer started working a little bit slowly after all this day. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really good to see what is happening in other continents as well, because majority of the presentations we had today were from European ports with some exceptions. So let me have a look to a couple of questions that we have received here and see if you can comment on those. So the question goes: can digitalization further the sustainability agenda, and if so, how?
Yes, the Port of Los Angeles has made a lot of strides in digitalization. We have a program called our Port Optimizer, which is providing a digital link for cargo. Previously, we only had a couple days notice when cargo was coming. Now with our digitalization efforts, we can assess whether when pretty much 2 weeks in advance, we know when cargo is coming. So it's enabling us to make an appointment system where we never had it before. Trucks would come and queue, wouldn't really know what they were picking up, but now we are working on an appointment system where trucks can come. They know where the containers are. They know how to, they know where to go and what time to be there. So there's less queuing and more efficiency. We're also, our general manager just announced a new program called the Control Tower, which is also going to work on truck queuing and being more efficient around the terminal, which is definitely going to reduce container moves on the terminal and reduce emissions.
Okay, that sounds good. And what would you say your organization is doing to prioritize, or which things it's prioritizing to drive sustainability and meet IMO 2050 agenda?
I would say that's our multiple demonstration projects that we have going on right now, especially looking at electric vehicles and hydrogen, which would really create a net zero emission to be able to meet those goals. I think we're probably testing more equipment than any other port in the world, with currently having 78 pieces of equipment out there. We know there's no silver bullet, so we're testing lots of different kinds of technologies, and we hope the results of our international collaboration will be able to expand the use of these projects to commercialization.
I understand. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you for being here for us today. Thank you for joining and sharing your knowledge and expertise. Before we move on, do you have any final comments or closing remarks to share with us?
Well, I know even though it's the morning for me, I know it's been a long day for many people at this conference. So thank you very much to you and the conference organizers for inviting me. And it's been good to see many of my friends and colleagues. So good to see everybody and wishing everybody a happy 2021.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and same to you. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the next speaker and the next presentation, Ms. Heather Tomley, Managing Director of Planning and Environmental Affairs, Port of Long Beach.
I'm Heather Tomley. I'm the Managing Director of Planning and Environmental Affairs for the Port of Long Beach, and I'm happy to join you today virtually to talk about our Green Port efforts. First, I wanted to provide a little bit of background about the Port of Long Beach. We are a large industrial complex located immediately adjacent to the Port of Los Angeles at the southern end of Los Angeles County in Southern California. We've been in operation for more than 100 years, and we're a major gateway for containerized imports into the United States. Nearly 40% of all containerized imports coming into the United States pass through this gateway. In the early 2000s, significant concerns were raised by the local communities and environmental groups about impacts that port operations were having on those local communities. As you can see, we're surrounded on all sides by local communities and immediately adjacent to those communities. And so those impacts were a significant concern. As a result, the Port of Long Beach adopted our Green Port policy in 2005, really as a way to make sure that we were addressing those concerns and putting the programs in place that were needed to address those concerns. The basic principles of our Green Port policy are that we wanted to protect the community from negative port impacts. We also wanted to distinguish the port as an environmental leader and to promote sustainability. We also wanted to employ the best available technologies. And lastly, to engage and educate the community about the port and things that we were doing to address their concerns. One of the first major efforts that we put in place after the Green Port policy was adopted was to partner with our neighbor, Port of Los Angeles, and to develop our Clean Air Action Plan. And this really was our guiding document for making sure that we were addressing air quality impacts. The original plan was approved in 2006, and we've moved forward with 2 updates to the plan since then to make sure that we're continuing to project forward in the programs that we need to put in place. The latest update was approved in 2017 and really charted our path forward into the future. While we've been focusing and continue to focus on regional air quality and local community health, with the update in 2017, we really focused efforts on addressing greenhouse gas emissions going forward. And this is to be consistent with IMO 2050, but also to be consistent with the policies in place in California to reduce greenhouse gases by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050 compared to 1990 levels. A couple of the key strategies to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions are to move forward with zero emission technologies. And we proposed aggressive goals to get to a complete conversion of all of the drayage trucks servicing the ports to be zero emissions by 2035, and for the terminal equipment operating within the terminals to be zero emissions by 2030. A couple of the key ways that we're working to achieve these goals: we have our Clean Trucks program in place, which has been in effect since 2008, really modernizing the truck fleet and bringing them up to the latest low emissions standards. But through this program, we plan to continue to advance our efforts to get to zero emissions by 2035. And we're implementing a series of different policy changes to help support that, like new registration requirements that trucks have to meet minimum standards to register newly into the program, and also a clean truck rate.
Okay.
And the money that we would collect through that rate would be used to pay for incentives to help support the transition into zero emissions. Another major effort that we have in place is investment in on-dock rail. We're looking to support the movement of cargo through the port through rail to avoid the use of trucks and clogging up the neighboring freeway system. As much cargo as we can load and unload off of rail coming directly into the terminals, it helps to avoid those types of impacts and also can provide more efficient operation. Port of Long Beach is investing $1 billion in on-dock rail improvements over the coming decade, to really make sure that we've got the rail infrastructure in place to support those operations. Another effort that we have in place is focus on vessel strategies and ways that we can work with the shipping lines to reduce emissions from their vessels that call at the port. We've had a very successful vessel speed reduction program in place for more than 15 years, where we incentivize ships to slow down on their approach and departure from the port, reducing emissions and significantly reducing greenhouse gas emissions from their operations. We also have our ECA zone in North America, and all ships are required to use low sulfur fuel. We have clean ship incentives that we offer for shipping lines that route the cleanest vessels to our port. So if they have tier 2 or tier 3 engines on board, we provide incentives for calls by those ships to really encourage preferential deployment of those cleanest ships to our port. And lastly, we have the use of shore power. We've installed electrical infrastructure so that when ships call at the port and pull up to berth, they can shut off their engines and plug into electric power. For terminal equipment, we have our Middle Harbor project, which has been in operation for the last several years. We're nearly completing construction of the final terminal, but it is a nearly fully electrified terminal, which uses automated equipment in many places to move the cargo around the facility in a very efficient and very clean manner. In addition to that, we're also engaged in many demonstration projects of zero emission equipment that's operated using traditional means with drivers. And we're looking at ways that we can develop and deploy that equipment and meet our 2030 zero emission goal. To be able to support all of these efforts to move towards zero emissions, we recognize that our demand on energy is going to increase. There are estimates that we could be as much as quadrupling our energy demand in the coming years as a result of the move to electrification and zero emissions. While we think hydrogen will also play a significant role, we need to be prepared for the energy resources that we're going to need at the port to support our operations. And so we're engaged in our energy initiative and really looking at different types of energy technologies, distributed energy resources that could be available in the port to support operations, doing a demonstration of a microgrid technology. And also we're engaged in an energy resiliency study, because as we become more dependent on the electrical grid, we need to make sure that we've got the technologies in place to be able to support resilient, reliable operations. because we don't want to be vulnerable to grid outages that could shut down operations at the port. So we're currently engaged in a study to make sure that we are planning appropriately for the resiliency that we need. To provide a little bit more detail about that, the microgrid technology demonstration that we're engaged in is looking at our Joint Command and Control Center facility and looking at ways that we can bring in multiple sources of power from generators, from solar power, and from the grid to make sure that we're balancing the energy that's necessary to support that facility in a way that provides that resiliency. In addition, we're also looking for the future to be able to support energy storage facilities coupled with our photovoltaic array at our maintenance facility, and to be able to store that energy as hydrogen that could be used for vehicles going forward. That's an effort that we're hoping to engage in the future. And one of the key areas that we're also engaged in is our zero emission infrastructure master planning efforts to make sure that within each of the facilities, we're looking at the energy resources that we'll need to bring in and that we're doing the detailed planning that's required to be able to put those resources into place so that we can make sure that we meet our timelines of 2030 for that conversion. And so that's an effort on planning and design is really where our efforts are going to be focused over the next couple of years to support our timeline. As a result of all of these efforts, we've had significant success. Each year we do an emissions inventory where we look at our emissions and compare to where we were before we started all of these efforts. Our 2019 air emissions inventory identified significant emission reductions across the board in diesel particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and greenhouse gases, as I mentioned, has been more of a near-term focus, but we still have significant emission reductions for greenhouse gases as well, and we expect that that will continue to improve going forward. This is all compared to where we were in 2005 before we implemented the Clean Air Action Plan. And it's all while cargo, here measured in TEUs, has gone up by 14%. So we've been able to demonstrate that you can still have significant environmental improvements and air emission reductions, while at the same time you're continuing to grow. We have goals set for ourselves in the Clean Air Action Plan. And as you can see, we've met our goals for 2023 for diesel particulate matter and sulfur oxides, and we're nearly there for nitrogen oxides. So that provides an overview of where we are at the Port of Long Beach. And we are continuing as we move forward into 2021 and going forward to implement our efforts on demonstrations of zero emission technologies, planning to make sure that we meet our zero emission technology goals, and moving forward with our efforts to continue to coordinate with the shipping industry, with the goods movement industry, to make sure that we meet our aggressive goals. So thank you for the time. I appreciate your attention to this presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather, for this presentation, which was last presentation of the Global Maritime Week Summit. So I still received a question, but we don't have a speaker here online. So this brings us to the end. I'd like to say huge thanks to our event sponsors, again, Cryocan, Awake AI, Sanco, Hempel, Visma, ION, Aker Arctic, and Seaport Solutions. Thank you so much for supporting us. We would also like to express our gratitude to all the speakers, sponsors, media partners, attendees, and viewers of the event. Without all of you, we wouldn't have had a chance for such a successful conference. Regardless some minor technical matters, I believe that we still delivered 2 full days of content on a number of pressing issues for global maritime industries, such as decarbonization, digital transformation, and many others. So many presentations and so many discussions over the last 2 days. If anything, we actually ran over time due to ongoing conversations, which had to be cut short due to the time constraints. So we do want to go back to physical conferences, of course, meet our clients, shake hands, and exchange business cards. However, as one of the speakers said earlier today, virtual events, they do as well contribute to emission reductions. And today, for us, this may be the silver lining of the current situation. I encourage all of you to stay tuned and stay connected with us. We have a group on LinkedIn that's called Wisdom Maritime Events, where you can always find the latest information about our upcoming conferences. We hope to plan more virtual and physical conferences later this year as well. We see a lot more potential for meaningful collaboration and maritime conversation. If you do have any questions, any specific feedback or suggestions, please feel free to contact me or any of Wisdom colleagues that you have been dealing with in the preparation of this conference. I'd like also to say thanks to my colleagues Rob, Jay, and Ignas for your support behind the scenes. Yeah, thank you so much for everything, and have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you.
Solutions is a startup that offers an IT solution from the family of port CDM systems to optimize port core processes. Its collaborative platform, Paula, is its technological bet for the future of Ports 4.0. It is based on automated real-time information exchange among the stakeholders. Each port call implies a considerable number of activities in which stakeholders have to solve a series of equations that would be impossible to do without the right tools. A large volume of information is handled from various sources, such as the level of congestion on the berths and the estimated times of arrivals and departures of ships. Any confusion or inaccuracy can trigger serious problems, generate errors, and lead to delays and unnecessary waiting times. Paula has emerged as a collaborative solution to face the challenges of the 4.0 revolution. Trust Seaport Solutions to improve your port call profitability, reduce environmental impact, and make your port more competitive. Seaport Solutions, integral solutions adapted to the reality of each port.
The next step of the nautical revolution, empowering smart port operations and optimizing the maritime logistics for efficiency, cost savings, and reducing the emission. In the future, port operations and sea traffic will be automated. With our help, autonomous ships, trucks, and drones around the world will carry cargo through ports. Here at Awake, we developed the platform with the data standards, APIs, data analytics, integrations, and cloud services that are needed to enable collaborative operational planning throughout the supply chain. We do not work alone making the change, but we rely on the growing ecosystem built around the platform. We already have many major industry players on board. Together, we can make an impact. We work on big things, both figuratively and literally, and make big things happen. Thanks to our work, ports are safer, more efficient, and better places to work at. And by enabling autonomous traffic, we can dramatically reduce the emissions load in the shipping industry and save our planet. Awake AI, tackling the big problems.